Han Li's Wuxia Adventures. Chapter 3450. So what if it's a defensive talisman array? I don't believe that with so many of you, you can't break a tiny defensive talisman array. Hurry and go. Miao Rengui shouted anxiously. Those cultivators from the Divine Province were originally around level 10 spiritual masters, but after coming to the lower star domain, their realms were suppressed to the peak of level 15 Great Mystic Cultivator realm. But even so, dealing with these ant-like members of the Qiao family in front of them was still a piece of cake in their eyes. However, they didn't expect that once they made a move, the situation would always be very different from what they expected. To be honest, MO12 gave them an unexpected surprise. Next, Little Sixth Zheng and the others also summoned their mystic beasts and spirit beasts one after another. The entire small courtyard already couldn't accommodate so many people. The four walls were trampled to the ground by the irascible beasts. The Marquis of Jiayuan's estate became a battlefield for the battle beasts. Only the sound of the wind could be heard everywhere, accompanied by beast roars and fighting. Miao Rengui stared in displeasure at the members of the Qiao family surrounded by the defensive talisman array and shouted angrily, "Capture the others first." Before he could finish speaking, Xiao Zhongbang flew out of the defensive talisman array. Another faint light circled around his palm, and 60 blue talismans once again formed a defensive talisman array, rapidly enveloping Little Sixth Zheng and the others. "Damn it!" Miao Rengui bellowed, "Don't let them shrink back into their turtle shells. Kill!" More than a dozen of Miao Rengui's subordinates simultaneously rushed up and slapped their palms on the two defensive talisman arrays. Madame Nei Ren tightly hugged Qiao Sen in her arms and pulled him back a few steps. Little Sixth Zheng and the others moved very quickly. After being enveloped by the defensive talisman array, they attacked Miao Rengui's subordinates from time to time. Relying on the protection of the defensive talisman array, Miao Rengui's subordinates were ambushed several times. Among them, a fatty wearing a headscarf was swept in the abdomen by a withered vine released by A.E., and he was almost stabbed by Captain Gao's sword. Fortunately, he was quick-witted and retreated several steps, thus avoiding another withered vine attack that A.E. threw at him. Looking down, he saw that the clothes on his abdomen had already been cut open by the sword qi. But with Captain Gao's strength, it would be difficult for him to hurt this profound realm level 15 expert. The fatty jumped up furiously as if he had been stabbed in the buttocks. Cursing, he took out a giant hammer from his inner world and smashed it at the defense rune array in front of him. Bang! Bang! It was as if he had not expected the defensive array glyphs to be so sturdy and unbreakable. The fatty roared and rubbed his fists, ready to fight against the defensive rune array. Little Sixth Zheng and the others made use of the defensive array glyphs to launch several attacks at Fatty and the others, but they were slapped back every time. If it weren't for the defensive array glyphs protecting them, they would have been injured long ago. Little Sixth, be careful. Hua Gu pulled Little Sixth Zheng's arm and kicked at Fatty's left leg. This time, when he kicked out through the defense array glyphs, it was like kicking an iron plate. Hua Gu hurriedly bent down and stroked her leg, rubbing it back and forth to reduce the pain. "Hua Gu, how are you?" Captain Gao called out anxiously. "Don't worry, I won't die. This defensive array glyphs is about to be broken," Little Sixth Zheng said with a cold expression. "Judging from the current strength of the attacks, in less than 5 minutes. Chapter 3451. The defensive array surrounding them was about to be broken. This naturally wasn't a good thing. Once the defensive talisman array was broken, they would be no different from little chicks. No matter how Miao Rengui's group fought, they wouldn't be able to resist. Sixth young Master Zheng exchanged glances with Captain Gao and the others before taking a deep breath. A voice kept circling in Little Sixth Zheng's mind, "No matter what, I have to escort the Qiao family out with my life. If something happens to the Qiao family, the little girl will definitely be very sad." Thinking up to this point, their hearts couldn't help but tighten. Little Sixth. Hua Gu cried out in alarm. Little Sixth Jing flew out of the defensive talisman array and clenched his fists tightly. His whole body suddenly erupted with a terrifying force, and he abruptly charged in the fatty's direction. Little Sixth! Hua Gu cried out in alarm. Looking at Little Sixth's posture, it seemed like he was going to fight someone to the death. Everyone widened their eyes as they looked in Little Sixth Zheng's direction. They saw him fly up and deliver a powerful blow with both fists, directly blasting the fat man across from him. Even a punk like you wants to. Before that fat man could finish his disdainful words, he suddenly felt a chill in his abdomen. He looked down and saw that Little Sixth Zheng had stabbed a dagger into his abdomen at an extremely fast speed. Following his hand gesture, he twisted and spun. With a ripping sound, a huge gash appeared on the fat man's abdomen, and blood gushed out. You! The fat man widened his eyes in shock. Using his last breath, he landed a punch on Little Sixth Zheng's shoulder. Everyone could clearly hear the sound of bones cracking. Little Sixth Zheng's bones were fractured by this fat man. Everyone widened their eyes in alarm. Little Sixth's cultivation was the highest among them, having already reached level 14 as a great mystic cultivator. But now, his shoulder bone was also fractured by that fat man's punch. Even so, the fat man was still furious. He felt that it was simply the biggest joke in the world for his abdomen to be injured by a weak ant in front of him. As a result, Little Sixth Zheng was beaten up violently like a torrential storm. This attracted the attention of many of his companions. Little Sixth! Hua Gu and the others dashed out of the defensive talisman array one after another when they saw Little Sixth Zheng being beaten up by the fat man. Unexpectedly, Little Sixth Zheng turned around and waved his hand at them, indicating for them to leave first. He only watched as that fat man grabbed Little Sixth Zheng's arm and fiercely twisted it before kicking him. How could the rest of the people just sit by and watch? It was even more impossible for them to abandon their companions and flee. Bah! Little Sixth Zheng spat a mouthful of blood on the fat man's face and said with a sneer, "You regard us as ants, but in the eyes of others in the divine province, you people are perhaps inferior to ants." What did you say? That fat man was truly infuriated by Sixth Young Master Zheng. He covered his bleeding abdomen with one hand and hurriedly took out a healing pill from his inner world and swallowed it. He gloomily stared at the Sixth Young Master, who was covered in blood and whose original color could no longer be discerned from his white robe. He sneered and said, "Stinking brat, today I'll use you as an offering to my saber." After saying this, amidst the jeers of his companions, he put Little Sixth on the ground in a few moves. Then, he raised his fan-sized palm and punched Little Sixth Zheng's head. If this hit landed squarely, Little Sixth's head would definitely bleed, and he would lose his life. Chapter 3452. Miao Rengui looked at his subordinates who were watching the show and said gloomily, "Why aren't you guys making a move? Why are you only watching the show? Boss, don't be anxious. In any case, none of these people can escape today. Let's see how the fatty beats that punk until he cries for his parents first. Isn't that punk arrogant? Let's see how he can still be arrogant now. Even if he doesn't kill that punk with this punch, he'll at least turn him into an idiot. Ha ha ha, I wonder what kind of scene it will be if this gigolo turns into an idiot." A burst of taunting laughter spread among them. Miao Rengui's subordinates all looked engrossed in watching Little Sixth Zheng suffer a setback. Some even crossed their arms in front of their chests, assuming a lofty and contemptuous posture. Hua Gu and the others dashed over and yelled, "Stop," their eyes nearly popping out of their sockets. However, with their skills, it was very difficult for them to rescue their companion from that peak mystic cultivator's hands. In the blink of an eye, that fatty's fist, which was the size of a copper bowl, was about to land on Little Sixth Zheng's head. Suddenly, a green vine, which was as thick as a person's wrist, shot over from afar and fiercely tugged at that fatty's hand. It directly coiled around his fat wrist 3 to 4 times and pulled tightly. The fatty instantly narrowed his eyes from the pain, feeling like his wrist was about to be broken in that instant. The pulling force was so great that he forgot to scream for a moment. Instead, he dazedly turned his head and looked in the direction the green vine extended. Everyone followed his gaze and looked over, only to see a plain-colored figure as white as snow arrive in front of them in the blink of an eye at an extremely fast speed. As fast as a bolt of lightning, it was only a fleeting glimpse. This person, who was pure and unadorned, had a frosty expression on her face as she coldly gazed at them, as if she was looking at a group of corpses. That expression made everyone unable to help but shiver slightly. They looked at her with a somewhat hesitant expression and subconsciously took a few steps back. Sister. Sister. It's sister. Xiao Sen's exclamation broke the silence. Everyone stared blankly at the little girl with a cold expression standing above the ruins. She just stood there quietly without making a sound. Her eyes were as cold as water as she looked at everyone. For a long time, she didn't say a single word. However, just by standing there like that, the killing intent and evil aura all over their bodies swept towards them like waves that splashed the sky. Miao Rengui couldn't help but tremble slightly. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the little girl. Who are you? He purposely used a very gentle tone to spit out these 4 words. It was as if as long as he calmly asked, the fear in his heart would be extinguished. However, what answered him was a green vine that suddenly shot out and viciously whipped him in the face. Pa! The burning vine whip landed on Miao Rengui's old face. He was so shocked that he couldn't help but tremble and jump up. It was just a reflexive action. After he jumped up, he realized that his actions were as hilarious as a clown's. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the bloodstains on his face. Miao Rengui couldn't help but roar angrily, "Stupid girl, how dare you! Pa! Pa pa! Pa!" Chapter 3453. One after another, the vine whip landed on his old face, body, neck, and head, again and again. Miao Rengui didn't even have a chance to breathe. Everyone stared at the scene in front of them, dumbfounded. The little girl didn't say a word. She just swung the vine whip in her hand and hit Miao Rengui's face again and again. Seeing this, Miao Rengui's subordinates were all shocked. They couldn't help but quietly retreat in all directions. "You little ants, where do you think you're going?" The peony fairy smiled and flashed to the front of the fat man. She stretched out her finger and poked the back of his head, giggling. The bell-like laughter inexplicably made the fat man tremble. He couldn't help but feel a little scared. Even though the woman before him appeared to be in the prime of her youth, possessed a voluptuous and graceful body that would make one drool, and her face was also extremely beautiful. But he didn't know why, but he just felt that she was dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. "Stupid man, why are you staring at me like that?" The peony fairy smiled and poked the back of the fat man's head again with her finger. This poke made the fat man suddenly feel a sharp pain in the back of his head. Reaching out to touch the back of his head, he immediately felt blood on his hand. His eyes immediately widened. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I used a little too much strength." The peony fairy twisted the fat man's arm with a smile. The fat man suddenly cried out. Cold sweat rolled down his head. His eyes were wide open and his face was distorted by the erosion of pain. He felt that his arm was already broken. The appearance of this arm didn't change, but the bones inside were probably broken. And it was the kind that was broken into pieces when touched, it was as soft as noodles. He could even hear the sound of bones inside, which was very terrifying. Xiao Mu's apricot eyes coldly swept an indifferent glance at that shrieking fatty. The moment she glanced at him coldly, the peony fairy suddenly turned hostile. She slapped the fat man's face and couldn't help scolding him angrily. "You're a big man. Why are you screaming? My little girl doesn't like to hear such a terrible scream." That slap immediately knocked the fat man's chin down. The fat man tilted his face in pain. After his chin fell, saliva dripped down his clothes. Seeing this, the peony fairy gave him a look of disgust. She kicked him back to Dao Wuji's side as if he was a piece of trash. She waved her hand and said, "Go and deal with him. He's so dirty that I don't even want to touch him." When Dao Wuji heard this, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. He immediately grabbed the fat man like he was grabbing a chicken and directly threw him into the pile of ruins behind him. The pile of rubble was originally a wall, but now, half of it had collapsed. The fat man was hanging there like a dead dog, unable to free himself for a long time. The rest of Miao Rengui's men were so frightened that they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at them and nodded with a smile. "Do you want to go over and sit by yourselves, or do you need us to send you over?" He pointed at the pile of rubble where the fat man was standing with a smile on his face. It was like a spring breeze, looking very warm. Miao Rengui's men all shuddered. They quickly shrank their bodies and moved their feet slightly. Chapter 34-54. One of the men, who was a few years younger than the rest, took a few steps back, turned around abruptly, and flew out of the courtyard wall. Looking at his posture, he wanted to abandon his companions and escape. Moreover, he also thought that he could definitely escape under the eyes of the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the others if he was caught off guard. Escape, he had to escape. Ji Chen narrowed his eyes. His powerful divine sense turned into a bolt of lightning and struck the man's back. The invisible pressure was like an insurmountable mountain. It hit the man so hard that he fell to the ground. He rolled twice on the ground, gasping for breath, and coughed violently. The young man felt as if his shoulder had been cut open by a heavy long knife. All the bones in his body seemed to have been completely shattered by this blow. He did not know what was going on. The rest of the people's expressions changed abruptly. They looked at Ji Chen in horror. They had seen it very clearly just now. This person did not move at all. He did not even move a finger. It was definitely just a wisp of divine sense. After releasing it, he beat the man to the ground. What did this mean? It meant that this person's divine sense was far above all of them. It was like an insurmountable mountain. It was too high to reach. How could they endure this? Want to escape? How would you be able to escape when someone else's divine sense enveloped you? Miao Rengui turned to look at the young man who was groaning on the ground and could not get up. The rest of Miao Rengui's subordinates all trembled and walked sensibly toward the ruins where the fat man was. They lowered their heads like roosters that had been defeated in a fight. How could they still be in high spirits and at ease? When they looked at their leader, Miao Rengui, they could not bear to look at him directly. The fat man and the others could not help but tremble secretly when they saw such a miserable state. The leader had been hit by countless vine whips all over his body. He was on the verge of death. He breathed in less than he breathed out. Would Arbor let him die so easily? The answer was obviously impossible. She put away the vine whip and stared coldly at Miao Rengui in front of her. She looked at this guy who was lying on the ground like a dead dog, not moving at all, as if he was dead. Xiao Mu shot him a chilly glance, and Boundless Blade immediately ran up. He jerked his buttocks and dragged Miao Rengui over like trash, ruthlessly tossing him at her feet. Xiao Mu glanced at the man who was paralyzed on the ground and stepped over him, walking toward her parents and family without consulting anyone. "Don't let him die." Her cold voice was like a bit of frost spreading from the depths of winter, so cold that it made people keep quiet out of fear. Xiao Zhongbang and Wei Ziqin recovered from their shock and rubbed their eyes. They could not believe that Jojo was standing right in front of them. "Zhou. Qiao." The whole family hurriedly withdrew the defense array glyphs and ran out, surrounding her in an instant. Arbor secretly clenched her fists. She thought of the dangerous scene just now. If she had come a step later, something might have really happened. Jojo, quick, come and take a look at young Master Zheng's injuries. Wei Ziqin was very careful. She did not have time to chat with her daughter. She hurriedly grabbed her daughter's hand and pulled her to little Sixth Zheng's side. Arbor crouched down next to little Sixth Zheng. She could not help but exude a cold aura when she saw that he was covered in blood. Chapter 34:55. This guy's shoulder bones were fractured, and his arms were also broken in several places. Most importantly, he suffered a brutal beating from that fat man. Not only was his body riddled with scars, but his internal organs also suffered very serious internal injuries. He truly looked too wretched, and Arbor couldn't help but feel pain for him. Does it hurt? Little Sixth Zheng shook his head with feigned ease. Don't worry. If it weren't for the fact that he was injured, Arbor really wanted to give him a good knock on the head. How could she not worry? This guy's fighting style just now was simply too reckless. It was completely a desperate stance of harming the enemy at the cost of his own life. Her needles were very swift, and she only needed to insert a few needles to stop the bleeding. She then took out a medicine bottle from her inner world and poured out a pill for him to swallow before saying, "The injuries to your internal organs can't be healed in a short period of time." As she spoke, she had already perfectly connected his broken bones, carefully applied ointment, and fixed them with a splint. This tendon-rupturing bone-mending ointment can't touch water for 2 hours after it's applied. It can be removed after 2 hours. If you can move your arms perfectly fine, that means there aren't any major problems. If it still feels swollen and sore, then you have to tell me immediately. We still have to apply the ointment again. Little Sixth Zheng was somewhat lost in thought as he gazed at the little stoic girl prattling endlessly in front of him. It seemed like they hadn't seen each other for too long. At first, he thought it was his misconception and kept feeling that the little girl in front of him was unreal. But now, after listening to her endlessly instructing him, she raised her hand to poke his forehead. Only then did Sixth Young Master Zheng return to his senses and smile at her. I'm very happy that you can come back, Jojo. I'm also very happy to see you guys again. Little Sixth, Captain Gao, Flower Mushroom. Seeing that Little Sixth's life was no longer in danger, Wei Ziqin completely relaxed. Feeling that her heart was still pounding non-stop like a drum, Wei Ziqin reproached him, Little Sixth, you really scared your Auntie Wei to death just now. When this child was fighting with that fat man, he truly didn't even care about his life. If Jojo hadn't arrived in time, the consequences would have been too horrible to contemplate. I'm fine, Auntie Wei. However, Little Sixth Zheng was very clear that he hadn't gone crazy at all just now. His mind was even clearer than at any other time. He only followed his heart and did his best to protect the Qiao family. He didn't want to leave any regrets in his life. For example, disappointing Jojo. Captain Gao walked over excitedly and said, Jojo, you came just in time. If Jojo had come a few minutes later, they probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. At this moment, they saw that the group of people who were originally bullying them were as obedient as quails, huddling in a corner and not daring to move or make a sound. Everyone felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure. Arbor nodded at the members of the huge bear squad. Her gaze swept past them one by one before finally landing on the demonic cultivator, and her eyes lit up slightly. The members of the giant bear squad had gathered. Her eyes were so bright that everyone noticed that she was a little strange. Logically speaking, it should be the first time the little girl had met and the others, but that gaze. It felt like they had known each other for a long time. Captain Gao touched his nose, but he didn't say anything. He put his strange thoughts aside. Chapter 34:56. He had interacted with the little girl many times and was used to her strange attitude, so he did not find it strange at all. On the other hand, and the others looked at the little girl curiously. Although they felt strange, they did not say anything. Mother. Arbor released Xiao Lin, with a wave of her hand and let the little girl run to her parents. Wei Ziqin, Xiao Zhongbang, and the others were pleasantly surprised. They did not expect that when their eldest daughter came back, she also brought back their youngest daughter whom they had been worried about these past few days. Lin, Lin, are you all right? Are you hurt? The family asked all at once. I'm fine. Xiao Lin waved her little hand, and a few drops of tears flashed in her eyes. She said emotionally, I was taken to the divine continent by them. It was sister who saved me. Sister and brother-in-law rushed back as soon as they knew that everyone was in danger. So that was it. Wei Ziqin and the others were enlightened. They were still wondering how Jojo could come back so timely. It turned out that he met Xiao Lin. Little Mo is back too. Xiao Zhongbang smiled. Really? Mo you heard and quickly ran over to ask, where's my big brother? Arbor's gaze fell on the child. Compared to more than a year ago, Xiao Yu had grown much taller, and his little face had lost its former naivety. He looked much more mature than before. She could not help but reach out and pat his head. Your big brother has already rushed to the palace. I'm sorry to have frightened you. Eldest sister-in-law, I'm fine. Mou quickly exclaimed. He was really not injured just now. He was just shocked when he saw Xiao Lu injured. This time, it's all thanks to you, Commander Hui, and young General He Tian who came to rescue us. Wei Ziqin said with emotion. I wonder how the situation in the palace is now. Mother, don't worry. With Lien here, nothing will happen. Arbor comforted them and turned his head to look at Miao Rengui, who was forced to kneel on the side. His eyes suddenly became dangerous. When Dao Wuji saw the little girl looking at him, he hurriedly dragged Miao Rengui as if he was dragging a bag of trash and threw him in front of the little girl. He clapped his hands and said with a smile, Aya, I thought these people had 3 heads and 6 arms, but when I looked carefully, there was nothing. TSK, they are really bold. They actually dared to come to this little girl's maiden home to cause trouble. Benefactress. Why don't you release this little monk? This little monk hasn't seen your mother for a long time. Let me see them. She couldn't deal with the little monk's repeated, female benefactor is your mother and female benefactor is your father. Arbor only felt that this little fellow was too long-winded and kept on shouting. It was like a demonic sound piercing through his brain. Thus, he helplessly let him out. Benefactress is her mother, benefactress is her father. When this strange appellation came out, everyone's attention was immediately drawn to him. When Wei Ziqin saw the little monk, she almost cried. She hurriedly went up and hugged the little meat bun who was running over. She had a surprised and happy expression. Kong, why are you here? This little monk was also saved by benefactress. Mother, I accidentally picked up Kong. Arbor reached out and picked up the little fatty. He said with a helpless expression, we'll talk about this later. Right now, the most important thing for her was to treat their wounds. Chapter 3457. Arbor's treatment of injuries was very fast. In less than a moment, she had treated everyone's injuries. After this battle, everyone more or less had some small injuries on their bodies. Xiao Mu distributed different pills, medicinal liquids, ointments, and the like to them. After applying them externally or ingesting them orally, it didn't take long for everyone to feel that their injuries had visibly taken a turn for the better, and their spirits were also much better. Seeing that everyone was fine, Arbor was relieved. She finally thought of Miao Rengui who had been thrown to the side by Dao Wuji. At this moment, Miao Rengui was like a quail kneeling at the side, not daring to even breathe loudly. This was a world of difference from the overbearing attitude he had before. How overbearing he was before was how funny he was now. Arbor looked at him coldly. This person's body was covered in wounds and he looked battered and exhausted. Xiao Sen struggled free from Madame Ne Ren's embrace and scuttled to Xiao Mu's side. He threw himself into her arms and complained loudly, "Eldest sister, they said they want to capture us alive. They want to capture me and Dad and Mom." When Xiao Lin heard this, she was also infuriated. Just as she was about to step forward and kick Miao Rengue, Xiao Mu swiftly caught her. At the same time, Miao Rengue, who had been lying on the ground like a quail, suddenly stood up and almost grabbed Xiao Lin's wrist. Seeing this, Dao Wuji slapped that person's face. "Yo, you still know how to pretend to be a grandson and lie low. What, you still want to capture a hostage in order to escape?" Xiao Lin raised her hand and patted her chest. Her pair of black eyes immediately widened. "Big sister. It's this person. It's his big brother who captured me. I heard them talking. He called that black-clothed man his big brother." Arbor immediately understood and nodded. Her eyes were cold. She looked at Miao Rengue and asked indifferently, "Are you going to confess honestly, or should I ask someone to search your soul?" Miao Rengue's expression changed drastically when he heard the word soul search. He couldn't help but shudder. This little girl kept mentioning the word soul search and said it so casually. She didn't look like a kind-hearted person at all. He looked into the little girl's eyes and immediately understood that she was not joking. If she did not confess honestly, the little girl would definitely not let her off. Soul search. Perhaps she would use something even more terrifying than soul searching to deal with him. Arbor looked at him coldly. "Have you thought it through? You only have one chance to choose." I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything." Miao Rengue was almost scared out of his wits. He quickly answered while trembling. "Miss, if you have any questions, please ask. I will definitely tell you everything I know." Arbor ignored the man's flattery and asked directly, "Who captured my sister?" Miao Rengue looked at Xiao Lin with trembling eyes. Seeing this, Xiao Lin was furious. Thinking about how this person wanted to capture her as a hostage, she wanted to go up and kick him a few times. "You're about to die. Why are you still stuttering?" Xiao Lin shouted unhappily. "I asked you something. Why are you looking at me?" Miao Rengue was very flustered at this moment. He personally saw his big brother capture the little girl in front of him and said that he would bring her back to the Divine Lands. Now, this little girl appeared here unharmed. Chapter 3458. What did this mean? It meant that something might have happened to his big brother, Miao Sheng. Otherwise, how could he have fallen into such a situation? Arbor raised his wrist and whipped him. What's there to consider? Just speak the truth. If you speak a single word of falsehood, Arbor gazed deeply at him, there will be no place for you in the deepest hell. Miao Rengue's heart constricted, and he hastily kowtowed in fright. He repeatedly said, "I absolutely don't dare to deceive Mississippi. TT, that's my big brother. The one who captured your sister is my big brother, Miao Sheng. You are not members of the Panga clan." Arbor's cold gaze swept over him. "Speak, which clan do you belong to?" Miao Rengue shrunk his neck and couldn't help but tremble. His eyeballs rolled uncontrollably as he hastily said, We are indeed members of the Panga clan. A vine whip landed on his eye, directly whipping half of his eyeball into the air. Miao Rengue rolled on the ground in pain, wailing incessantly. His other eye glared at Arbor resentfully. Not a single word of truth. Arbor flew into a rage. His eyes glinted sharply as he stared at that person. He then turned to look at He Chen, who was standing leisurely on the side. Peach Blossom. The little stoic was impatient, revealing an expression that said, "I don't want to talk to you anymore." The venerable Peach Blossom immortal couldn't resist rolling his eyes. He took a few steps forward and poked her forehead with a finger. "I've said it many times, my name is not Peach Blossom. This venerable peach blossom immortal is called He Chen. He winked and pursed his lips in dissatisfaction. Without waiting for Miao Rengui, who was lying on the ground, to stand up, He Chen's bony palm abruptly pressed down on Miao Rengui's skull. Miao Rengui immediately let out a blood-curdling scream, as if he was experiencing the darkest and most terrifying thing in his life. His entire body trembled uncontrollably, and his lips couldn't help but twitch. Jolin was shocked. She pulled her brother and took a step back at the same time. The siblings were confused. Looking at Miao Rengui, who seemed to be experiencing something terrible, they couldn't help but look at each other. "Second sister, what is he doing?" Xiao San asked in confusion. "That uncle looks like he's in a lot of pain." Jolin nodded and could not help but whisper, "Just now, big sister said that she wanted to search his soul. I'm afraid this is it." "What's the use of soul searching?" "Amitba, benefactress's younger sister, benefactress's younger brother, you two are too young now." It was normal that he didn't understand. It was better to stay away from such dangerous and frightening matters, so as not to spoil your naive natures. "Excellent, excellent." Jolin and Jolin looked at each other in confusion. What was going on? The two of them, brother and sister, were told by a 5-year-old monk, "Are you two still too young?" "Big sister, I really want to slap him," Xiao San mumbled. The corner of Jolin's mouth twitched. She raised her hand to rub her brother's little head and nodded heavily. She also wanted to pull this chubby little monk over, and viciously take 2 bites. Ha ha ha. After searching Miao Rengui's soul, He Chen directly threw him to the ground. Miao Rengui was not completely dead. At this moment, he was still struggling at death's door, and his eyes were rolled back. His eyes were filled with the color of death, and his throat was letting out waves of roars before he died. Right now, he only had a trace of consciousness left. His entire person was basically useless. Chapter 34:59. He slumped to the ground, his only eye glowing with resentment. He tried his best to turn his head to look at Arbor. "He's from the Shi family." The venerable peach blossom immortal walked to Arbor's side. He took out a clean handkerchief and wiped his fingers with a disgusted expression. Then, he threw the handkerchief to the ground and shattered it into pieces with a blast of saint power. Mysophobia was a disease. Arbor glanced at him and asked, "The Shi family?" "That Shi family?" "This guy's big brother, Miao Sheng, is the second daughter of the Shi family's first branch, Shi Yongqian's close confidant." So this incident was caused by Shi Yongqian. Anger roiled in Xiao Mu's heart, and her eyes, which were as clear as a cold moon, seethed with a thunderous fury. What a Shi Yongqian! What a Shi family's second daughter! She hadn't had time to settle the score with her for what happened in her previous life. Now, she had the guts to attack her family again. It was simply too wonderful for words. Arbor's eyes were filled with murderous intent. "Shi Yongqian, you've lived long enough." Miao Rengui's 8th-level spiritual beast, little Taisui, walked over with a shrunken blaze hound in his hand. Before he could say anything, he suddenly heard a series of barks. The 3 puppies that had been peacefully staying on Paradise Planet suddenly jumped out. One of them jumped onto little Taisui without a word and slapped the blaze hound to the ground with one paw. The other 2 puppies dashed forward and patted the head of the trembling flame hound from the left and right. The 2 puppies carefully rubbed the blaze hound's head with their paws, as if they were caressing something. However, the following actions and images were not as beautiful. One of the puppies used its sharp nails to cut open the blaze hound's head. Furry took out a spirit beast's crystal core and looked like it was in a difficult position. It looked like it was wronged as it swallowed the power inside the crystal core. Everyone was dumbfounded. They couldn't help but turn to glance at Arbor. Arbor didn't have the mind to pay attention to the 3 puppies. She was completely focused on the Shi family's attack on her. She had to get back at them for this. Since Shi Yongqian dared to send people to the lower star zone to make trouble for her, she should know the consequences of courting death. Arbor took a deep breath. She recalled how she had suffered at the hands of this woman in her previous life, and the coldness in her eyes deepened. Because of the Blaze Hound's death, Miao Rengue, who was already in a daze, suffered another heavy blow to his mind. He instantly collapsed to the ground while fresh blood gurgled out from his mouth, and his eyes were already extremely unfocused. His Highness the Crown Prince is here. Hui Feng's joyful voice sounded from outside the door. Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince. All the soldiers knelt down and saluted. Mo Lien strode over with a group of purple forest guards, followed by the Marquis of Stability, Zhao Sheng, and the others. Rise. Mo Lien waved her hand and had them rise. She quickly walked into the ruined Xiao estate courtyard. She couldn't help but frown. Judging from the extent of the destruction, it must have been a major battle. Fortunately, she and Jojo had arrived in time. Otherwise the consequences would have been unthinkable. Mo Lien quickened her steps. She arrived at Arbor's side in the blink of an eye. Jojo. Are you all right? Greetings, Your Highness, everyone hurriedly bowed respectfully. Chapter 3460. Mo Lien's gaze swept over them one by one, and she hastily said, Everyone is Jojo's relatives and friends, so there's no need to be overly courteous. Dad, Mom, we've startled you. Xiao Zhongbang and Wei Ziqin smiled with gratification. Little Mo, you and Jojo came back just in time. It was a scare but not a mishap, a scare but not a mishap. How's the palace? Arbor asked in a low voice. Grandmother is injured, and it's quite serious. Ah. Grandmother's injury is very serious. Mou was startled when she heard this, and she hastily ran to their side. Eldest brother, where is grandmother injured? She injured her right hand. I'm afraid you'll have to take a look at her injury. Mo Lien frowned and turned to grab Arbor's small hand as she spoke. Wei Ziqin was instantly anxious. Jojo, quickly enter the palace and examine Her Majesty the Queen Dowager. Okay. Arbor nodded. Mom, don't be anxious. I'll definitely treat grandmother. Wei Ziqin recalled that little Sixcheng had also injured his shoulder and arm just now, and it was extremely serious, but her daughter had also roughly treated it in a few strokes. Presumably, Her Majesty the Queen Dowager should be fine as well. Then let's not delay any longer. There's nothing else to do here. Jojo, quickly enter the palace with little Mo, okay? Arbor nodded and looked back at Miao Rengue, who was staring at the sky with his eyes wide open. He had already died from the backlash of the spirit beast's death. He snorted coldly. This person really got off too easy. Those people are useless now. Arbor swept a glance at the row of people gathered next to the ruined wall and said aloofly, including this Miao Rengue, crush them into ashes and find me an exquisite little jar to store them in. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist twitching his mouth, and he nodded with a grin. Oh my God, even when their little miss did such a cruel thing, she still appeared so amusing. The little stoic's eyes were aloof, but her words were gentle and soft, as if she wasn't going to crush their bones and scatter their ashes. I want to give Miss Shi a gift. She turned around and glanced at He Shichin. We have to wrap it up nicely. Otherwise, the host will only say that our etiquette is not good enough. Yuan Shichin couldn't help but cough lightly and nod. Got it. If the little girl wanted to give Miss Shi a gift, then the gift couldn't be too light. 1 jar wasn't enough, so 3 jars would be just right. Little Tai Sui glanced at Ji Qin speechlessly. Do you know what you're called? In the eyes of others, what you're doing is called being an accomplice to a villain. How could that be? My Jojo is so cute. How is he helping the evildoer? He was obviously helping the little guy catch the evil and eradicate the traitor. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't help but roll his eyes at him. He pulled little Tai Sui over and pushed it toward the pile of rubble. Remember to be careful. He had to be fast, ruthless, and accurate. Don't dawdle. I'll go inside and find a few exquisite jars and jars. Do your best. Little Tai Sui, what happened? Why did he become the culprit? When Fairy Ginkgo saw this, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. Oh my God, little brother Tai Sui, do you want big sister to help you? I'll thank your whole family first. Little Tai Sui irritably rolled its eyes at Fairy Ginkgo before walking toward Miao Rengui's subordinates who were already scared silly. Miao Rengui's dozen or so subordinates were all scared to death. From the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and the others subduing them with thunderous methods, to soul-searching Miao Rengui and killing his 8th level spirit beast. Chapter 3461. After this series of events, they had long since been scared out of their wits. How could they possibly think of resisting? When they saw little Tai Sui walk over, one of them hurriedly fell to the ground and cried tearfully, "Venerable Immortal, please spare my life." Before the suppression of cultivation realms, Luo Rengui was the one with the highest cultivation base among them. Now that Luo Rengui had been dealt with so easily, how could the remaining people not be afraid? Now, they were filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, they would never have followed Luo Rengui to the lower star region to show off their might. Now, they were in big trouble. They had to pay with their lives just to show off their might. This was obviously not a good deal. However, the situation had already been decided. No matter how much they kowtowed and begged for mercy, even if they kowtowed to death, no one would pay them any attention. Little Tai Sui glanced at them indifferently, then slapped the top of their heads with a backhand. At the same time, Arbor and Mo Lien rushed back to the palace at top speed. They hurriedly headed for the Empress Dowager's Longevity Palace. Along the way, Arbor couldn't help but frown when he saw the devastated state of the palace. Someone came to the palace to cause trouble. Yes. When I arrived, someone surnamed Wu brought 3 people and captured a large number of concubines to threaten father. When Mo Lien thought of her old father's frightened appearance, the anger in her heart couldn't help but overflow. Even though this adoptive father of his was muddle-headed and bad, the love he had for him did not contain any benefits, and there was no discount at all. Moreover, although this old man sometimes lost his wits due to lust, he still listened to his ministers. All these years, the entire Mo kingdom could be considered to have had good weather, and the people were in good health. If another obstinate and self-opinionated person were to lead the Mo kingdom, they might not be able to do as well as his father. He didn't think that these people would be so bold as to come to the lower star region and touch his family. Xiao Mu's expression also darkened, and her eyes emitted a chilly glint. This group of people came for me. They were sent by Shi Yongqian. Of course, she also had a lot of questions in her heart. Why would Shi Yongqian go through so much trouble to come to the lower space zone and attack her family? Also, it was quite a scheme of them to blame the Pangu clan for everything. Jing Ti, the patriarch of the Pangu clan, must have been investigating her since she killed his daughter, Jing Minyao. What about Shi Yongqian? She had many conflicts with Xiao Mu, but it had never resulted in anyone's life. So how did Xiao Mu also coincidentally set her sights on her Xiao Mu family? Could it really be a coincidence? When the two of them passed through the drooping flower gate, Arbor paused slightly and stared deeply at the side of the garden. For men were tied to the edge of the pool, whips were whipping their bodies. Arbor looked away. Them? Mo Lien nodded. Then, she called someone over and whispered a few words to them before letting them leave. It was a good court, but now it's a bloody mess. Get someone to drag them out of the palace and beat them. The order he gave was to whip them for 7 days and nights, then execute them by cutting them. Sir Jojo blinked. She suddenly felt that she had been too soft-hearted. Those people who had caused trouble in her home should have been handed over to her husband to be punished. They should have been reduced to ashes by now. It was hard to appease her anger. Chapter 3462. Elder Wu and the other three had long had their cultivations crippled by Prince Mo's order. Now, they were no different from cripples. Even if they were dragged out of the royal palace to be whipped, they were simply powerless to resist. Soon, a large crowd of commoners gathered around the bustling royal palace's entrance to watch the show. Seeing those bastards who forcibly entered the Mo Kingdom capital to commit violence being punished by His Highness the Crown Prince, there wasn't a single person who didn't clap and cheer. Upon hearing that the Crown Prince had returned from the Divine Province with the Crown Princess, they were all unable to contain their joy and automatically knelt in the direction of the royal palace, calling out, "His Highness the Crown Prince." During this period of time, they had had enough of these bandits' attitude. Seeing them receive such punishment, they naturally vented their pent-up frustrations. When Arbor and Mo Lien hurried to the Empress Dowager's Longevity Palace, Gong Chang and had already been waiting for a long time. At this moment, he hastily ran over and led the two people into the Empress Dowager's bedchamber. The elderly woman was currently leaning against the gold-threaded cedar bed. When her gaze landed on the pair of children who had just entered, her eyes clearly brightened. Grandmother. When Arbor saw that the elderly woman's complexion was pale and unwell, her heart involuntarily tightened. "Quick, quick, come over and let grandmother take a look at you." On the contrary, the elderly woman was very cheerful and didn't appear to be injured at all. Instead, she laughed heartily. If it weren't for Empress Zhao hastily holding her down, the elderly woman might have lifted the blankets and gotten off the bed to welcome them. "Greetings to Royal Father, Royal Mother." Arbor curtsied. The old Great King hastily said, "Don't be so courteous. Your grandmother's arm has suffered a very serious injury. Crown Princess, quickly come over and carefully examine her." Arbor nodded and quickly walked up to sit by the bed. Empress Zhao stood up and stood to the side, gazing at the elderly woman with deep worry. Arbor carefully examined the Empress Dowager's arm bone, her brows slightly creased. The Empress Dowager's hand injury was actually more serious than Little Sixth's. Moreover, she was already old, so it was better not to use some overly strong medicines. The Great King and Empress Zhao saw that she was silent after the examination, so they asked worriedly, Is it untreatable?" "Yes." Arbor nodded. Then, he took out his needle bag and helped the old lady lie down. "But grandmother has to listen to me. She has to follow my instructions in her daily life. She has to abstain from certain foods and can't be too greedy." She had just taken her pulse and found that the old lady's arm was not the only injury. Her body also needed to be nursed back to health. When the old lady heard this, she immediately muttered unhappily, "I didn't eat too much. I only take 1 or 2 bites every time." Empress Zhao couldn't help but hold her forehead as she exchanged glances with the old Great King. The Empress Dowager's personal old mama, Feng Gu, smiled and said, "Crown Princess, you really have to talk to the Empress Dowager this time. Don't tell on me." Empress Dowager Meng muttered. Suddenly, she felt a slight tingling in her arm. She looked down and saw that the little fellow had already taken out the silver needles from her arm. Apart from the slight tingling just now, he didn't feel anything wrong with it. Empress Dowager Meng said with a smile, "Jojo, your healing skills are getting better and better. I didn't feel anything when you healed me." Arbor pursed his lips. He took out a pill and stuffed it directly into the Empress Dowager's mouth. "Grandmother, don't be greedy for sweets anymore. I gave you a prescription. You can drink it once a day for half a month. I guarantee that you will be full of energy in the future." Chapter 3463. You won't feel thirsty anymore. "How did you know?" Empress Dowager Meng was halfway through her sentence when she seemed to have thought of something. She quickly shut her mouth and smiled awkwardly at Empress Zhao. Empress Zhao was angry and amused at the same time. This old lady was like an old urchin. She always lied and hid things from them. She was sick and didn't like to take medicine. What can happen to me? I'm not bragging, but I have the strength to go up the mountain and fight a tiger. Prince Emo rolled his eyes in annoyance. He stepped forward and gently pressed the restless old lady onto the bed. Grandmother, just listen to Jojo. Rest well for a while. Follow Jojo's prescription and nurse your body back to health. The old lady showed a bitter expression as if she was heroically sacrificing herself. She reluctantly nodded her head. Making her drink that bitter medicinal soup every day was really going to kill her. After Xiao Mu finished bandaging her arm, she gently tucked her in before earnestly saying, "Grandmother, be good and recuperate. Later, I'll make 2 bottles of jelly beans for you to eat one every day. I guarantee you'll like it." Emo Lien was speechless. Jojo looked like he was coaxing a child. It was really annoying. The old lady's eyes lit up when she heard that there were candies that tasted good. "Don't worry, I'm a person with self-control. If you ask me to follow the prescription, I'll definitely follow the doctor's instructions." Feng Gu pursed her lips. She didn't expose her Empress Dowager. Arbor nodded. "That's good. Grandmother, rest well." "Hey, Jojo, you just came back and you're leaving again. We'll stay here for the next 2 days. Don't worry, we'll talk again when you're better." The Empress Dowager was relieved. She nodded and said, "Okay, okay." Queen Zhao was a bit baffled. She glanced at the Empress Dowager before looking at Lady Qiao Qiao. She thought to herself, the young Crown Prince Consort said that she wanted to chat with her mother-in-law. I really don't know how she's going to continue chatting awkwardly with someone who stops talking after 3 sentences. Arbor looked at Empress Zhao. Then he stood up expressionlessly. "Father, Mother, let's go out first." The old Great King saw that the Empress Dowager was fine. He nodded and hurriedly followed his son out of the Empress Dowager's bedroom. "Son, what's going on?" "It's a long story. Let's go to the study." The old king nodded upon hearing this and turned to the study with Emo Lien. Along the way, he asked worriedly, "Will these people come again in the future?" "Don't come again." Just one visit had almost cost him his life. What if those people from the Divine Prefecture could come to their small galaxy as they pleased? Wouldn't that be they would be unlucky once every 2 to 3 days? Emo Lien looked at the mess in the garden. Her face darkened. She shook her head and said, "It won't happen again. Father, don't worry." The old Great King always knew that his son was very reliable. As long as it was something he said, the old king would believe it 1,000 times over. The father and son went to the study to discuss the matter. Arbor accompanied Empress Zhao to the garden and sat down. "Mother, let me see the bruise on your hand." Empress Zhao was stunned. She smiled and held out her hand. "Mother is fine." Arbor lifted her sleeve. As he applied medicine for her, he said in a low voice, "This happened because of me. I've implicated you." Chapter 3464. When Empress Zhao heard this, she involuntarily knitted her brows and said, "What silly things are you saying? Since we are a family, we naturally share blessings and misfortunes. What's there to implicate?" Arbor looked up at her and nodded. "Don't worry, this kind of thing will never happen again." Empress Zhao smiled at her and nodded. "Mother personally believes in you too." The two of them chatted for a while more. Seeing that the queen wasn't in good spirits, Arbor had someone send her back to the palace to rest. That night, Arbor drew several thousand different jade talismans on Fish Orchid Planet. Currently, most of the talismans she drew were purple talismans, so their effects naturally couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as the yellow and blue talismans from before. When the sky was about to brighten, Arbor followed Mo Lien to the gate tower on the outskirts of the Mo Kingdom capital. Looking up at the chilly starry sky, Arbor turned to meet Mo Lien's eyes. "You can start now, Jojo." Mo Lien nodded at her. Arbor then waved her hand, and several thousand jade talismans floated up around her. As if a whirlwind was blowing, they started spinning rapidly. Arbor looked at the wondrous scene in front of her without a change in expression. She extended her small hands and slowly fiddled with the jade talisman arrays. 10 sets of triple defense, confinement, and annihilation talisman arrays swiftly took shape in her hands. Even though Mo Lien was experienced and knowledgeable, she couldn't help but sigh softly. His Jojo could actually create so many purple talismans in a single night on Fish Orchid Planet where the flow of time was 12 times faster. It was simply breathtaking to construct such a powerful attack, defense, and annihilation array. Dao Wuji, who was also watching the show from the gate tower until his eyeballs almost fell out, also couldn't help clicking his tongue in wonder. The little stoic is amazing as expected. It's not like no one in this world knows how to draw defense and confinement talisman arrays, but every talisman array she draws is basically a purple talisman. Its talisman power is definitely much higher than that of ordinary defense and confinement talisman arrays. Moreover, I don't know where this little girl got her experience in drawing talismans. I've never seen such a talisman array that superimposed defensive, confining, and killing effects together. It was rare for Ji Chen to finish listening to Dao Wuji's rambling, and a trace of pride appeared on her face. "That's right, this is my family's Jojo. That talisman crafting cultivation is absolutely beyond your imagination." "Humph," Dao Wuji couldn't help but snort. "What do you mean by yours? Spouting nonsense all the time." When the sky was about to brighten, some of the citizens of the Mo Kingdom capital who were still in a daze were awakened by the loud noises on the streets. Everyone put on their clothes, washed their faces, and went out of the door or looked out of the window. Everyone was shocked by what they saw. An astrolabe the size of a millstone appeared in the sky above the Mo Kingdom capital, enveloping the 4 cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. Currently, the sky was covered by this astrolabe. Jade talismans emitting lustrous purple light could be seen circulating and swaying on the astrolabe, bobbing up and down. Everyone ran out of their rooms in a clamor and looked up at the sky, conversing with each other in bewilderment. "What is this, mother?" the children asked, blinking their eyes in bewilderment. "I don't know whose handiwork it is to actually assemble countless talisman arrays into this," an elderly man who knew a little about talisman arts looked up at the sky in excitement. He muttered to himself for a while, but he actually couldn't find the right words to describe this large-scale talisman array in front of him. Chapter 3465. This kind of large-scale talisman formation was truly unheard of and unseen. The turbulent flow of talisman energy within was simply breathtaking. It seemed to be formed by absorbing the essence of the sun and moon, endlessly growing and multiplying. The talisman energy seemed to be immortal. Arbor was truly straining to operate this great astrolabe formation with her own strength. That's right, she had used heaven and earth as a medium and the 8 directions as a medium to control the dozens of triple-layered talisman formations to form a great astrolabe formation. This great astrolabe formation was the highest level of talisman formations. Of course, with her current cultivation as an Earth-level talisman master, it was still very strenuous for her to barely operate this great astrolabe formation. If she had the support of the profound talisman energy of a heaven-level talisman master, it would be much easier to create this great astrolabe formation. However, she couldn't be bothered to think about such trivial matters at the moment. She was only trying her best to perfect this great astrolabe formation as much as possible. When this great astrolabe formation appeared, the entire court was shocked, both inside and outside. After receiving the news, the great king of the Mo Kingdom, along with the queen and a group of courtiers, all rushed to the city gate tower to take a look. At this moment, the great astrolabe formation's operation was nearing its end. Everyone could only see that above their heads, countless flying talismans were rapidly flowing, forming streaks of light. Suddenly, an enormous purple dragon flew out of the talisman formation and roared towards the east, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Everyone cried out in alarm. The Marquis of Stability, Zhao Sheng, exclaimed in pleasant surprise, "Ah, a formation spirit can be formed within the talisman formation, and a dragon-shaped one at that. The power of this formation must be extraordinary, extraordinary. The Crown Princess is so powerful. The Crown Princess, the Crown Princess, the Crown Princess." Loud shouts sounded from all directions, and everyone couldn't help but reveal a trace of joy on their faces. His Highness the Crown Prince's wife was truly extraordinary. Xiao Mu slightly clenched her hand into a fist, and with a slight retraction and release, the countless purple talismans originally hovering in the sky all gathered together. They whirled around with a whoosh before abruptly dissipating in the air. The only thing left in Arbor's hand was a white jade talisman that emitted a faint purple light. The crowd of commoners was simply stunned by the scene before them. They had never seen such a large talisman construct array. They cheered loudly and even applauded one after another. When Xiao Mu came back to her senses, she saw a group of people cheering with glowing faces like idiots. The little stoic expressionlessly glanced at them. The courtiers who were cheering enthusiastically suddenly felt that the little crown princess was looking at them as if she was looking at a bunch of idiots. The Marquis of Stability, Zhao Sheng, coughed and stabilized his old face. He chuckled and said, "Congratulations to the Crown Princess and congratulations to the Crown Princess for successfully setting up the array. The Crown Princess talisman crafting skills are becoming more and more exquisite. Her array formation skills are also far superior to ordinary people. Flattery won't get through." Zhao Sheng very energetically flattered the little stoic loudly. Prince Mo speechlessly glanced at him. His lips turned up slightly, and he led the little crown princess toward the old great king who couldn't contain his joy. At this time, Mo Lei was truly grinning from ear to ear. The more he looked at his daughter-in-law, the more pleasing she seemed to be to his eyes. Fortunately, his son had the foresight to strike first and gain the upper hand against such a great talisman practitioner, so he had long since decided to take her as his wife. As expected, his son was much better than him. Just his taste in picking a wife couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as his father's. Arbor glanced at the great king, who was grinning like the skin of an orange, with a stoic expression. Chapter 3466. The little stoic said expressionlessly, "Great king, this is the key to opening the great astrolabe formation. You can open and close it at will by dripping a drop of blood. The talisman energy in this great astrolabe formation is probably only enough to last for 10 years. If it isn't opened every day, it can last for about 20 years. When the time comes, I will naturally come back to replenish talisman energy." When the old great king heard this, he grinned from ear to ear. "It's great that she's coming back to replenish talisman energy. That's great, it couldn't be any better. In that case, his daughter-in-law might have to come back every 3 to 5 years. With how worried his son was about his daughter-in-law, he would definitely come back together with her. Wouldn't he be able to see his son at all times?" The old great king grinned so widely that his eyes couldn't be seen. Empress Zhao couldn't resist reaching out to secretly pinch his elbow. Cough. The old great king immediately adjusted his expression and said solemnly, "This humble one thinks that it's better to keep this great astrolabe formation open at all times, so as to avoid being unable to withstand another attack from extraterrestrials." Arbor also nodded when she heard this. She naturally didn't know what the great king was scheming. She only felt that the great king might have been frightened by this incident. It was fine to keep it open at all times. At worst, she could just come back every 3 to 5 years to replenish talisman energy. There were naturally benefits to keeping the great astrolabe formation open at all times. Once this great astrolabe formation is activated, the Mo Kingdom capital will be filled with spiritual energy that is 100 times more than the outside world. In addition to gathering defensive, confinement, and annihilation formations, this great astrolabe formation also has mystic guiding and spirit guiding talisman formations. Arbor's voice wasn't loud, but at this time, whether it was the great king and the others on the city gate tower or the large crowd gathered below the city gate tower, everyone heard her clearly. Thus, many people couldn't resist whispering to each other and asking questions. Especially those cultivators. The instant the great astrolabe formation was activated, they had already sensed an extraordinary mystic energy aura. Now that they heard the little crown princess tell them about the effects, they couldn't help but be overjoyed. Of course, there were practically no spiritual masters in the Mo Kingdom capital, so very few people could sense the spiritual energy aura here that was 100 times higher than the outside world. The transfer rune formation in the astrolabe formation can only transfer 10,000 people at most. When Xiao Mu said this, she was also a bit excited on the inside. She had never thought that the teleportation array attached to the astrolabe grand formation would be able to teleport 10,000 people. This teleportation glyph array was reserved for them to use at the most critical moment to escape. Of course he probably wouldn't need to use it. After all, the confinement and extermination rune arrays attached to the great astrolabe formation could kill all of them, not to mention 4 people like Elder Wu. Even if 400 or even 4,000 people like Elder Wu came here in the future, they would all be killed. The purpose of her setting up this teleportation glyph array was to leave a way out for the Great King and the others. Don't you feel that the sky seems to have darkened? As he spoke, the Marquis of Jiajing Su Pingyong, who was always good at smoothing things over, looked up at the gloomy sky in astonishment. Just now, it looked like the sun had just risen from the east. How could it be? In the blink of an eye, it looked like dark clouds had gathered. Everyone rubbed their eyes and discovered that they weren't seeing things. What's going on? It's really darkened. Upon hearing this, Arbor looked up at the sky, then glanced at her husband. Mo Lien couldn't help twitching his mouth. He kept feeling that this matter was developing in a strange direction. Chapter 3467. Mo Lien coughed lightly and said softly, "This great astrolabe formation is too heaven-defying. I'm afraid heavenly law was coming." Sir Jojo expressionlessly looked at the pitch-black sky and handed the jade talisman key to the Great King. Everyone looked at the sky and felt their hair stand on end. Mo Lien said helplessly, "Purple Forest Guards, escort the citizens into their houses." He turned to look at the Mo Kingdom's old king and his people, who were all dumbfounded. "Royal father, royal mother, this place should be a little unsafe. Why don't you go and hide under the city gate tower first?" Empress Zhao instantly tensed up. She walked up to grab her son's hand and asked, "What happened?" The sky was so dark and gloomy that it looked like a storm was about to come. "Is there going to be hailstorms?" Mo Lien was a bit amused. She reached out to support her mother and shook her head. "Don't be nervous, mother. This is normal." Previously, when Jojo produced a supreme-grade divine rank pill, Heavenly Law also had a stroke like this. Today's great astrolabe formation was definitely a heaven-defying formation. How could such a top-notch talisman formation appear in a tiny lower star domain? Arbor was still expressionless. He looked up for a moment before saying to Prince Mo, "Don't bother. Have them all come back." At the foot of the city gate tower, a group of fearful commoners were being evacuated by the Purple Forest Guards. When they heard the young Crown Prince Consort's words, they all stopped in their tracks and looked up at this stoic-faced Crown Prince Consort. The little stoic glanced at them expressionlessly. "They're dispersing." What was dispersing? The commoners were naturally at a loss. They didn't know why His Highness the Crown Prince suddenly ordered them to leave. Now, they were even more confused as to why the Crown Princess told them not to evacuate. Mo Lien looked up at the sky again, and her mouth couldn't help but twitch again. Jojo really was right. The dark clouds and rolling thunder that came menacingly just now seemed to have rolled back above the sky, the clouds parted and the sun could be seen. Where was the oppressive dark clouds from before? Everyone looked at each other in confusion. They all felt that today's weather was a little strange. Dao Wuji couldn't help but laugh wildly. He slapped his thigh and shouted, "I knew it. There's a 99% chance that the heavenly Dao is a relative of this little girl." Last time, when the little girl produced a supreme-grade black-patterned divine pill, the heavenly Dao made such a big fuss and wanted to strike the little girl. In the end, it was just for show and slipped away after a few strikes. This time, it was even more laughable. Originally, he wanted to come aggressively and kill the person who created this heaven-defying talisman formation. In the end, when he saw that it was a little girl from afar, he immediately slipped away without even looking at his face. The little stoic, looking at the funny faces of He Chen and the others, the little fellow blinked and said very seriously, "I really don't know the heavenly Dao." Puff, the peony fairy couldn't help bursting into laughter. The great king looked at the sky in confusion, then looked at his son and daughter-in-law. "Jojo, is everything all right now? Will there still be trouble in the future?" Arbor shook his head. "Since it didn't strike this time, it naturally won't come in the future. Unless it was sick." Arbor pursed his small lips. "Drip a drop of blood to open the astrolabe formation. You can also choose whether or not to have the formation spirit guarded every day." Yes, of course it has to guard it every day," the great king hastily said. This way, he could naturally consume more talisman energy. Chapter 3468. The old great king's plan was brilliant. This way, he could make his son and wife come back a few more times. Mo Lien saw through her old father's thoughts and glanced at him with a spurious smile, but she didn't say anything. He reached out to hold Jojo's small hand and said softly, "You've also been busy the whole night. Let's go back to the palace and rest for a while." Arbor nodded. After the two left, the excited commoners on the streets still couldn't resist discussing this matter in high spirits. Of course, with the protection of this great astrolabe array, the Mo Kingdom capital was already surrounded by a copper wall. Countless cultivators who heard the news would rush to this mystic domain in the future. After all, the mystic energy here was much denser than some of the naturally formed mystic domains in the outside world. Cultivating here would definitely yield twice the results with half the effort, to the extent that the Mo Kingdom capital was almost overcrowded in the future. The old great king could only issue a decree to raise the entry requirements. Only those who met the requirements could enter the city after registering their cultivation. These were all for later. After resting for the whole afternoon, Arbor returned to the Chiao family in the evening. At this time, the Chiao family's courtyard was already undergoing orderly restoration work. Holding her husband's hand, Arbor entered the main hall with the family and sat down to talk for a while. The way they spoke was basically Wei Ziqin, Madame Nei Ran, and Xiaoyao chattering away, while the little crown princess listened from the side occasionally. She would interject, but after a few sentences, she would look up at her husband and ask him to add on. Mo Lien was secretly amused and couldn't resist saying, "Father, mother, second uncle, second aunt, Jojo means to bring everyone to the divine land this time. We'll let you all settle down in the divine land in the future. In Dragon Flame City. Jojo is now a rich woman and has purchased many properties. When the time comes, you can live wherever you want." When Xiao Sen heard that they were going to the divine land to play, he was the first to jump up and raise both hands and feet in agreement. Okay. Father, mother, second uncle, let's go to Shenzhou with sister. You only know how to play every day. Wei Ziqin poked Xiao Sen's little head with her finger. Then he looked at Arbor hesitantly and said, "Jojo, if we follow you to China, will we be a burden to you in the future?" This was the last thing Wei Ziqin wanted to see. Today, because they were too weak, they almost became a burden to Jojo and his son-in-law. Jojo hopped off his stool and walked over to Wei Ziqin. He held her arm and said seriously, "Mother, you will never be a burden to Jojo. If there is a day when Lotus and I are able to conquer the 3 continents, what meaning is there in conquering the 3 continents if you are not by our side?" Wei Ziqin was touched and poked the little fellow's head with a funny finger. "You love to talk big and make your mother happy. Mother, Jojo is speaking the truth." Mo Lien nodded and said, "You should come with us to the divine land. One day, when the 2 of us conquer the 3 continents, we can celebrate together." Everyone, the crown prince was so confident. It was as if conquering the 3 continents was right in front of them. Prince Mo looked at everyone with a smile. "The spirit energy in the divine land is rich. This way, we can settle down earlier and slowly expand our meridians. If we cultivate well, our cultivation will definitely improve a lot. We don't have to worry about our cultivation stagnating." Chapter 3469. Xiao Zhongbang and the others were somewhat tempted when they heard this, but their gazes all turned to their daughter, niece. "Jojo, will it really not affect you?" What they were most worried about was that they would become a burden to the little stoic. If that really happened, then it was fine if they didn't go to the China. So what if they had to stay in this small galaxy for the rest of their lives? Xiao Qiao was an existence that people could only look up to. From the very beginning, she was destined to soar into the sky. As her family, they must not block her path to growth and soar. Seeing their hesitant gazes, Arbor involuntarily pulled her father's hand and then her mother's. She looked at second uncle and second aunt and said, "I want our family to be together and never be separated again." Everyone's gazes shifted, and yearning expressions appeared on their faces. Wei Ziqin looked at her daughter's serious expression and suddenly burst into laughter. She nodded and said, "Okay. Mother has entered a demonic barrier. Daughter is right. A family is together, so it's good no matter where we go. We'll bear hardships together and enjoy blessings together. We can even eat chaff, eat radishes, and pickles together." "Right, right, right." Madame Neyren also nodded repeatedly with a smile. She then joked, "We've never traveled far in our lives, so we'll just treat this as a vacation." Our dear Qiao Sen was the happiest. He really treated this as a vacation that he was about to leave immediately. He was so happy that he couldn't control himself and kept rolling around in Arbor's arms. "Okay, sister. Are there any fun places in the China? When I go, will sister take me out to play?" Xiao Lin couldn't resist pouring cold water on him. "You have to study. You don't have time to stroll around at all." Xiao Sen, the little monk, couldn't resist chuckling. "Benefactress's brother, when you come to the China in the future, we can also be companions. This little monk has to do morning prayers every day, so I'll wake you up to study then." "Xiao Sen, thank you so much. How can you be so considerate?" Everyone couldn't resist bursting into laughter and looked at Xiao Sen sympathetically. This little brat originally wanted to travel to Shenzhou, but unexpectedly, he was caught by the little monk and became a study companion. Jolin couldn't help but hold his stomach. "Oh my God, Kong Kong, you're usually so eloquent and logical, but you don't forget to study when you're chanting scriptures." Hearing this, the little monk nodded and said seriously, "This little monk thinks that studying and traveling thousands of miles are equally important. Even if a person travels thousands of miles, if he is illiterate, in the end, he is still uncultured." Arbor, everyone was speechless. Xiao Sen's face flushed red, and he couldn't help but snort. Was this little monk beating around the bush to say that he was uncultured? If they're uncultured, then so be it. Wasn't he still young? Taking advantage of his young age, he should go out and see more. That was the right thing to do. Big brother, big brother. Xiao Sen jumped onto Mo Lien. "Big brother, when I go to Shenzhou, you have to take me around." As if he had received a hot potato, Mo Lien turned back to look at his wife and hurriedly said, "If you do your homework, I'll take you around. Otherwise, if your sister roars like a lioness from Hedong, I won't be able to help you." Xiao Sun couldn't help but look at Mo Lien with an expression as if he was looking at a henpecked husband. "Big brother, you can't do this." Chapter 3470. What? This imp actually said that he couldn't do it? Prince Mo resisted the urge to smack him on the head and glared at him while fuming. Our dear Xiao Sun clung to the crown prince and tried his best to slander him. As men, we must assert our masculinity in front of our wives in the future. Only then can we let them know that we men also have dignity. Everyone, just keep courting disaster. Jolin guffawed and reached out to pull her younger brother to the side, casually giving him a small knock on the head. "Shut up, don't think of dragging brother-in-law down with you. When brother-in-law angers sister, will you come out and block him?" Arbor glanced at everyone in the hall, his gaze clearly softening. At this time, a servant came to report, "Eldest miss, your friends are here." It must be little Sixth Zheng and the others. Arbor's eyes brightened, and he hastily said, "Quickly invite them in." "Forget it, I'll go welcome them myself." With that, he pulled Mo Lien and walked out the door. His friends from Huge Bear Squad came to greet them and surrounded them, laughing and chatting merrily. Arbor invited everyone into the main hall. Xiao Zhongbang and company exchanged some pleasantries with little Sixth Zheng and the others before inviting them to take a seat. At this time, the main hall had just been set up. Laughably, there was only a row of chairs, and even the tables hadn't been properly set up yet. Everyone was unconcerned, however, and they chatted in the hall. Thus, Mo Lien opened his mouth to publicize Sir Qiaoqiao's intentions. He asked, "Captain Gao, are you all willing to follow us to the Divine Province?" Captain Gao and the others were startled. Then, they exchanged glances before finally focusing their gazes on little Sixth Zheng. Evidently, everyone basically regarded Sixth Young Master Zheng as their backbone now. Captain Gao especially relied heavily on little Sixth Zheng and had to listen to his opinion on any decision. Little Sixth Zheng muttered to himself before looking at Arbor and Mo Lien, saying softly, "I think my personal opinion is that I want to pass through the upper 6 prefectures normally with my own strength before going to the Divine Land. Of course, this is just my personal opinion." Little Sixth Zheng looked at Captain Gao and the others. "Everyone can have their own," Captain Gao waved his hand. "We, the Giant Bear Squad, advance and retreat together. Since Little Six said so, you must have your reasons." Little Sixth Zheng nodded. Presently, Jojo has set up a large array in the Mo Kingdom capital, which is extremely beneficial to our cultivation. Our own realms are close to the spirit realm's critical point. If we can take the normal path to the 6 prefectures, our years of training and hard work will not be in vain. When Arbor heard this, his eyes lit up, and he nodded in agreement. "I respect your opinions. If you want to go to the 6 prefectures and the upper 3 prefectures, I will definitely support you." After thinking about it, she took out a space ring from her inner world and handed it to little Sixth Zheng. "However, don't reject the resources I'm giving you." Captain Gao and Hua Gu exchanged glances. The cheerful Hua Gu laughed heartily and patted little Sixth Zheng's shoulder. "Since it's Jojo's kind intentions, we won't refuse. Besides, we just happen to need these resources. With these, we can better catch up to our companions, and we won't be left far behind by Jojo." Everyone guffawed and nodded repeatedly. Little Sixth Zheng also smiled when he heard this, and he silently accepted the space ring that Xiao Mu gave him, firmly engraving this favor in his heart. Chapter 3471. Captain Gao, we're on the same team. Since I've gone to Shenzhou before you, I'll naturally wait for you in Shenzhou with peace of mind. I believe that with your strength, you'll definitely be able to meet me in Shenzhou in the future. Even if it took 3 to 5 years, or even longer, as long as it was the giant bear squad's choice, she would unconditionally support it. This was the trust and friendship between friends. Pure friendship was just that simple. Sister Go was so moved that she jumped up and went forward to hug Arbor. She choked with sobs and said, "Jojo, we'll miss you." Arbor reached out and patted her back. Looking at the little girl with a slightly dark face, he nodded and said, "Let's meet again in Shenzhou. Let's meet again in Shenzhou. Let's meet again in Shenzhou." Several pairs of palms overlapped. In that instant, all the members of the huge bear squad felt that their hearts were so close to each other, Wei Zichin's eyes flashed with tears. She suddenly smiled and said, "Since we're so happy today, we must stay here and have a meal together. I'll go tell the kitchen." "Hey, what kitchen are you talking about? It's been destroyed long ago." Xiao Zhongbang shook his head, amused and annoyed. Xiao Zhongxing laughed heartily. "How about this? We're not particular people. Let's go to the back garden, which is still intact, and have a barbecue." "Second uncle, good idea." Xiao Sen was the first to raise his hands in agreement. Jolin's eyes suddenly lit up. She nodded and said, "I want to eat peaches." Wei Zichin was amused by this pair of children. She poked her younger daughter's forehead with a finger. "You're still thinking about those peaches. When you were 3 years old, when our whole family was on the run, you hugged a peach for 2 days. Everyone couldn't help but laugh at this little foodie when they talked about it." Jolin wasn't embarrassed. She giggled and flashed to her sister's side. She hooked one of her arms and said, "Humph, I love peaches." Wei Zichin and Xiao Zhongbang looked at each other and felt that time had passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, their children had grown up. Therefore, everyone set up a barbecue rack in the back garden. There was wine and meat, and they enjoyed a farewell banquet with laughter. The time spent together was short, and it was time to part. Little Sixth Jing drained the wine cup in his hand in one gulp before turning to give Arbor a deep look. However, they believed that one day, they would be able to meet again in the Divine Prefecture. The next day, Xiao Mu entered the palace to see Her Majesty the Queen Dowager. She handed over the black-striped longevity pill that she had personally concocted, as well as a storage talisman that contained many pills and talismans. "Grandmother." The little fellow shook her hand and took out a medicine bottle from the storage talisman. "I've already pasted the name and dosage on this medicine bottle. You have to follow my doctor's instructions and take it every day." When she came back this time, she discovered that her grandmother was aging very quickly, and her vitality was severely depleted. Especially after this battle, her grandmother had consumed a large amount of vitality. Currently, there were many wrinkles on her face, and she appeared to have aged by no less than 10 years. She couldn't set her mind at ease, so she left behind prescriptions to nurse her grandmother back to health. However, time was limited, so she could only secretly instruct Feng Gu. It was naturally inconvenient for her to stay and nurse her grandmother back to health every day. "Good child. Grandmother is already so old. Time spares no one." Empress Dowager Meng smiled good-naturedly. Chapter 3472. Everyone will grow old. Grandmother's realm is stagnant, so naturally, her vitality will gradually decline with the passage of time. That won't happen. Arbor pulled her hand and shook it, saying softly, "Grandmother, as long as you listen to me and take your medicine on time, I guarantee that you'll be radiant after a month. Moreover, isn't it too early to say such discouraging words? You still have to see your great-grandson being born." Elderly Lady Qiao was startled, and then her eyes turned into crescents as she smiled. She patted Xiao Mu's small hand and nodded repeatedly in delight. "Good, good, good. My good grandchild, grandmother definitely won't let you down. Grandmother will definitely take good care of herself and watch as my precious great-grandchild is born." Feng Gu smiled and curtsied as she entered. "His Highness the Crown Prince is here." Grandmother nodded. When she saw Sun Ziyu's tall and straight figure enter, she kept looking at him with a strange gaze. Prince Mo was baffled. After exchanging some pleasantries with grandmother, he practically pulled his wife and fled. After leaving the bedchamber, Crown Prince pulled Sir Jojo into his arms. He narrowed his eyes and looked down at his wife. "Tell me honestly, what bad things did you say about me to grandmother just now?" Why did grandmother keep looking at him with such a strange gaze? It was as if she expected better from him. What did he do to make grandmother stare at him as if she was looking at an unfilial grandchild? It really made his hair stand on end. Arbor blinked, her gaze somewhat evasive. She muttered, "What could I have said? I didn't say anything." Prince Mo looked at the little fellow and saw that she seemed guilty. He immediately reached out and scratched her. "Tell me, what did you say?" Arbor's little face was wooden. After holding it in for a while, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. She twisted in his arms and said, "Nothing. He didn't say anything. Ah, I still have to go to the outskirts to set up another array. We have to leave tomorrow. Time is tight, so don't fool around." Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When did he fool around? This little fellow was used to bullying him. Just look at her. Whenever the topic was brought up that she didn't want to talk about, she would immediately twist it around forcefully. She didn't know what awkwardness was. "Let's go, let's go." Miss Chiao tugged at his sleeve and urged him twice before pulling him out of the palace. Over the past year, the number of zombies on Seekong planet had clearly decreased by a lot. In addition, there was a continuous stream of cultivators who automatically organized and participated in the zombie clearing missions. Following the sharp decrease in the number of zombies, the lives of the people on Seekong planet once again became peaceful, and their days gradually became better. The fortifications on Quansikang Star were still being erected. In the next few years, there was probably no need to worry about the corpse puppets taking action again. The two of them left the city and headed for the suburbs. Arbor said softly, "I think that Tianyun should have completely withdrawn from Seekong planet." Mo Lien nodded. "Yeah, I think so too." As such, the number of corpse puppets would not increase because there was no Tianyun controlling them from behind the scenes. The days on Seekong planet will also become better in the future, and Xiaoyu won't be under so much pressure in the future. Thinking of her increasingly mature and steady 12th brother, a trace of joy also appeared on Mo Lien's face. Yeah. As expected of the younger brother he valued. He was becoming more and more thorough in handling matters now. This time, he also displayed his strength and tenacity when fighting against the group of bandits from the Divine Continent. Chapter 3473. Although Mo Lien was quite satisfied with her younger brother, she still muttered, "We have to let him continue to gain experience." Hearing this, Arbor nodded thoughtfully. "Xiao Yu is already so outstanding, but you're still not satisfied with him. It seems that I've been too lenient with Xiao Sen." "Mo Lien, Xiao Sen, I can't help you anymore." Mo Lien didn't expect that he would associate this with Xiao Sen, so he could only silently shed tears of sympathy for his younger brother. He casually said, "When we go to the Divine Province, Xiao Sen will have a chance to stay by our side. At that time, we can properly train him and grind down his temper." Arbor felt that Mo Lien's words made a lot of sense, so he nodded and said, "Okay." Everything could wait until they returned to the Divine Land. The most important thing now was to fix all the nearby arrays. "I've left a few sets of protective array glyphs. When the time comes, I'll ask the Great King to send them to the Southern Shao Kingdom, Southern Bailey, and Northern Wei." Mo Lien naturally agreed with a smile. The special passageways were basically in the capitals of these big countries. As long as these places were protected, it would be even more difficult for people from the three states to come again. They had to guard against the wrath of the Heavenly Tao and break Jojo's attack and defense arrays. After suffering a few setbacks, they probably would not dare to cause trouble again. Moreover, when they returned, this matter would not be settled peacefully. They had to continue to punish some people as a warning to others. They had to let them act out and make them scared. Only then would they know how precious life was and that they should cherish the good times. Have the jade stones found in the Panga clan started to be polished into jade pieces? Arbor asked curiously. At this moment, she had used dozens of jade array glyphs, so the blank jade pieces in her hands were basically empty. She switched to using ebony pieces. It's already started. When we return to Dragon Flame City, those jade pieces will probably be handed over to you. We can probably hand over 100,000 pieces first. This should be enough for a while. Those jade stones can continue to be produced and polished. It's not far from 1,000,000 jade pieces. Okay. Xiao Mu happily nodded her small head upon hearing this. Without these blank jade slips, she couldn't draw talismans anytime and anywhere. She was really not used to it. Li Yao did not expect that the jade of the Panga clan could be polished into 1,000,000 blank jade pieces. That was not bad at all. Leaving aside the soul-gathering bell and the wealth that Jing Ting had left behind, the jade alone was enough to make the battle against the Panga clan worthwhile. After the two of them finished setting up the array formation in the outskirts, they strolled around the vicinity. After making sure that there was nothing out of the ordinary in the surroundings, they returned to the city. Arbor returned to the Qiao family, intending to bring his family to the palace for a gathering. The Empress Dowager's body was getting better, and the crisis was gone. The great king was overjoyed and decided to hold a banquet that night. He invited all the officials of the third rank and above to the palace to celebrate. Therefore, after Arbor and the Crown Prince finished setting up the talisman array outside the city, they went back to the city to pick up the Qiao family. Unexpectedly, when they arrived at the Qiao family, they saw a group of servants in gray servant uniforms fighting with several servants of the Qiao family outside the door. His father, Qiao Zhongbang, and his mother, Wei Ziqin, were standing in front of the door with ugly expressions. A few familiar-looking men and women were standing in front of them, and they were arguing with them. Arbor immediately frowned and scolded with a displeased expression. He walked out of the carriage step by step. Mo Lian narrowed her eyes and coldly stared at the group of people who were making trouble in front of the Qiao family's door. Chapter 3474. Eldest Miss, Eldest Miss. When the Qiao family servants saw that their powerful eldest miss had returned, they all seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, their spirits roused. Arbor carefully looked at the people who were quarreling with his parents. He felt that their faces were somewhat familiar, but for a moment, he could not remember who they were. At this moment, cousin Pu Rulan quickly walked out and gracefully bowed. "Greetings to your highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess." Arbor hurriedly helped her up. Cousin need not be so courteous. He then turned to look at the quarreling people and suddenly had a flash of inspiration. That Zhou Yuan from the Zhou family? Wasn't this cousin Pu Rulan's ex-husband, that Zhou Yuan who had kicked up a fuss about demoting his wife to a concubine for the sake of riches and honor? Cousin had already divorced this person, so why was he here to kick up a fuss? Pu Rulan nodded and coldly glanced at Zhou Yuan and his people who were kicking up a fuss in front of the Qiao family's entrance. Zhou Yuan's mother, that woman with a head full of pearls and jade and as fat as a pig, was shouting at the top of her lungs, "If not for the disaster your Qiao family caused, how could our family be implicated? Right now, our family's old master has been beaten to death and our family's wealth has been completely stolen. I don't care, you should compensate our Zhou family, you must compensate. Didn't you hook up with the richest family, the Gao family? Do you even care about a trifling sum of money?" Eldest Aunt Xiao Wenxiu angrily glared at Zhou Yuan's mother and sternly shouted, "I advise you not to cause trouble here, or else you won't be able to clean up the mess. All right. You want to use the Crown Princess to pressure people again." Zhou Yuan's mother was so anxious that her eyes turned red. Just as she was about to pounce, a black shadow flashed forward and grabbed the back of her neck by the clothes. The moment the purple forest guards acted, they immediately tidied up the quarreling people in front of the entrance and forced them to lie down. Zhou Yuan jumped in fright. When he turned around and saw the unhappy crown prince, he rolled his eyes and hurriedly said, "Your Highness Crown Prince, Crown Princess, it's not that we've come to disturb you on purpose. It's just that our family has been turned into a mess by those experts from the Divine Prefecture. Our days are really difficult to live on." Arbor coldly glanced at them, then his gaze fell on Zhou Yuan's mother. At this moment, the old woman was still cursing incoherently, incessantly seeking death. Arbor lightly raised his hand. Immediately, two violet forest guards stepped forward and dragged Zhou Yuan's mother away. Zhou Yuan's eyes immediately filled with terror. He looked towards the cold-faced little crown princess and cried out in alarm, "Crown Princess, what are you doing? My mother didn't commit any major crimes. What are you doing? You can't use your noble statuses to be so overbearing and not give people a way out." Arbor icily glanced at him, then shifted his gaze and saw Huifeng walking over while carrying a struggling woman. Huifeng immediately tossed the woman in front of Arbor and cupped his fists. "Crown Princess, this woman is sneaking around the back door." Arbor glanced at the woman, but he couldn't recall who she was. However, Pu Ruolin raised her voice and angrily shouted, "Gao Qiqi, you're also here to make a fuss. Your Gao family was implicated by the Qiao family and your father died, and all of your family's wealth was taken away by experts." When Gao Qiqi heard this, her gaze instantly sharpened. She jumped up from the ground and struggled to pounce at Pu Ruolin. "You bitch, whose father are you cursing to die?" Before her claws could reach Pu Ruolin's face, Huifeng suddenly grabbed her wrist. With a crack, Gao Qiqi immediately squealed like a pig being slaughtered. Chapter 3475. Qiqi. Zhou Yuan instantly became even more flustered. He hastily stepped forward and hugged Gao Qiqi's shoulders, shouting at Arbor and the others, How can you be so unreasonable?" Gao Qiqi clutched her broken arm, her eyes overflowing with tears as she unwillingly glared at Pu Ruolin. Originally, this woman wasn't even worth half a spirit coin in front of her, but now, because she had latched onto the Qiao family, latched onto the Crown Princess and His Highness the Crown Prince, she actually dared to be so impudent in front of her. Pu Ruolin was too lazy to speak with her. She only glanced at her mockingly before walking to her mother, Qiao Wenxiu's side. Zhou Yuan looked at his ex-wife, unable to vent his anger. Ever since they divorced, this ex-wife had become more and more outrageous. Now, she actually dared to treat her mother-in-law and husband with cold eyes. She simply didn't know what she was talking about. Arbor coldly swept a glance over them. "Do you want to confess yourself, or does this crown princess use special methods to make you confess?" Zhou Yuan's eyes darted around, then he wailed, "Crown Princess, this lowly one has been wrongly accused. This lowly one really can't continue living at home, so this lowly one thought of borrowing some spirit coins from Ruolin to get by." Pu Ruolin coldly interrupted him. "Do you think everyone is a fool? Didn't you all gather at the front door to make a fuss with uncle and aunt so that slut Gao Qiqi could sneak into the Qiao family from the back door? Little bastard, hurry up and tell us what you came here for." Qiao Wenxiu was so angry that her face was ashen. Today, mother and daughter were brought here by the Qiao family to discuss matters. Her older brother, Qiao Zhongbang, mentioned that after they moved out of Seacombe Planet, they would be allowed to live in the Marquis of Jieyuan's estate. He said that he had already left enough money for them. In addition to the monthly salary that the imperial court would still give them, this amount of spirit coins was enough for them to live on. They didn't even need to dismiss the servants at home, so they just needed to live a good life. Qiao Wenxiu and Pu Ruolin were currently greeting Qiao Zhongbang and his family with faces full of gratitude. Unexpectedly, that little bastard from the Garden of Zhou had brought his mother and company over to cause a ruckus. He even insisted that it was the Qiao family's fault for harming his father's life. What a joke. When the cultivators from the Divine Prefecture attacked, you didn't hide at home. You were caught and lost your life. How is it the Qiao family's fault? The Qiao family is also a victim, okay? Their house hadn't been fully repaired yet. The Gao family is a rich and powerful family, and there are times when you don't have any spirit coins to spend. Then, she turned to look at Gao Qiqi and said with a cold smile, could it be that the family has really declined because of the death of their father? Bah, you bitch! What nonsense are you talking about? Gao Qiqi screamed harshly like an evil spirit. She rushed over and wanted to hit Pu Rulan's face. However, as soon as she lifted her arm, it drooped down as if it was crippled. It was sore, painful, and uncomfortable. She couldn't help but cry. Yuan Lang, you have to uphold justice for me. This shrew, she's really hateful. Just as Zhou Yuan was about to explode, he saw Arbor raise his eyes slightly. Without another word, a purple forest guard beside him slapped him across the face. With this slap, Zhou Yuan lost 2 of his teeth. His face instantly burned with pain, and he felt like his tongue was about to be tied up when he spoke. Arbor looked at them with an icy gaze. Dictum talisman. To deal with this kind of petty person who couldn't even reach the profound realm, there was no need for a dictum talisman made from jade talismans. Chapter 3476. It was the lowest grade paper talisman. A blue talisman was enough to make them confess honestly. Speak clearly, Arbor said coldly. Who ordered you to come here and cause trouble? That lord said that the Qiao clan has a token to leave the city. He wanted us to steal it and give it to him. Arbor's eyes narrowed dangerously. To the side, Mo Lien coldly looked at the man kneeling on the ground, his mouth opening and closing as he spat out the truth. Her lips curved into an indifferent sneer. So there were still fish that slipped through the net. The young couple looked at each other and saw a hint of coldness in each other's eyes. At this moment, Zhou Yuan also said, that lord killed my father with a single palm strike. We were forced to come to the Qiao clan and help him steal the token. At this moment, Gao Qiqi's face was already ashen. Her eyes were filled with resentment as she glared at Zhou Yuan. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have made a fuss about marrying this pretty boy. When it came down to it, he didn't have the slightest ability to take responsibility. No matter what others asked, he would confess. If he had randomly made up a reason, perhaps they could still have escaped today. But now the crime of colluding with the enemy and betraying the country was bound to fall on their shoulders. Gao Qiqi hurriedly walked forward on her knees and cried out, no, it's not like that. Listen to me. Arbor swept his sleeve and heavily slapped Gao Qiqi's face. I didn't ask you to speak. The young crown princess looked at her coldly. She turned her head and continued to ask Zhou Yuan, where is that person right now? That lord is in our Zhou clan. He was injured 2 days ago. Right now, the entire city is sealed off. There's also a very powerful talisman seal in the sky. He can't get out, Arbor's lips curled. He stepped forward and heavily kicked Zhou Yuan's leg. With a crisp crack, Zhou Yuan woke up from the pain. He hugged his leg and rolled around on the ground. His face was pale from fright. My son. Zhou Yuan cried out like a mother in mourning. Take us to the Zhou clan. Arbor looked at the pretty boy in front of him indifferently and said coldly, don't try anything funny, or I'll turn your whole family into ashes. Zhou Yuan's body trembled. At this moment, fear had already seized his mind. He didn't expect that he would be caught red-handed just because he thought of a way to steal a pass token. He even confessed everything in a daze. Now that she thought about it, it was as though she was in a dream just now. Her mind was very clear. Although she was anxious and knew that she shouldn't reveal everything, for some reason, she obediently answered all of the Crown Prince Consort's questions word by word. It was as if his mind had been controlled by something strange at that time, forcing him to reveal everything he knew. Zhou Yuan's mother saw that the situation was not looking good. With a "I-oh," she rolled her chubby body forward and reached out to hug the Crown Princess's leg, but she was kicked away. "Aya!" Zhou Yuan's mother fell to the ground, slapping her thighs as she wailed, "We had no other choice. Our whole family's lives were in that lord's hands at that time. If we didn't agree to help him, he would have dealt with our whole family like how he dealt with my husband." Arbor heard this and couldn't help but sneer. Heh. They sounded really pitiful, but just now, their faces were really ugly to the extreme. Chapter 3477. When he thought of how Zhou Yuan's family actually harbored such vile intentions, an indescribable anger arose in Arbor's heart. Take them away. Mo Lien couldn't be bothered to waste words with them. She directly waved her hand and had the purple forest guards lift this group of people up. Huifeng chuckled as he lifted Zhou Yuan and swayed his body. He then reached out to caress Zhou Yuan's dog head. "Young Master Zhou, I advise you to obediently lead the way and not play any tricks. Be careful of your dog life." Zhou Yuan couldn't help but shudder in fright, and he hastily said, I know, no, I won't play any tricks, why yes." He was nearly scared out of his wits, so how could he dare to play any tricks now? Moreover, the purpose of his family's visit had already been completely exposed. Even if he stiffened his neck and refused to admit it, it would be of no avail. Others had already seen through them long ago. The group majestically arrived at the entrance of the Zhou residence, naturally attracting the attention of many people along the way. Those who were curious followed along, causing the group to grow larger and larger. Mo Lien and the others had just arrived at the entrance of the Zhou residence when they heard a loud noise coming from inside. The two vermilion doors suddenly fell down. Everyone focused their eyes and immediately saw a man with round, tiger-like eyes quickly walking out with a woman by the neck. His fierce-looking face was filled with malevolence. "Don't come over," the man sternly said. He tightened his grip around the delicate woman's neck. "If you come over, I'll kill her." "Sister!" Zhou Yuan cried out in alarm. Zhou Yuan's mother's eyes were also about to pop out as she repeatedly yelled, "Damned bastard, hurry and save my daughter. Daughter! Daughter, don't be afraid, mother is coming." "Ah! Sir, let go of my daughter, let go of her." She was about to pounce forward as she spoke, but the man tightened his grip around the woman's neck. "If you come any closer, I'll strangle her to death." When Zhou Yuan's mother saw that the whites of her daughter's eyes were about to pop out, she didn't dare to go forward and repeatedly waved her hands to beg for mercy. Sir, please spare my daughter. Sir, I won't come over. Please have mercy on me, please have mercy on me." Pu Rulan could not help but frown when she saw this. His sister-in-law had actually fallen into the hands of that thief. Her sister-in-law usually had a gentle personality and did everything in a gentle and weak manner. Although she did not have much of an opinion of her own, she had always been led by the nose by Zhou Yuan's mother. However, she was very kind-hearted. It was rare that she was the only good bamboo shoot in the Zhou family's nest of bad bamboo shoots. Previously, when she and her mother, Xiao Wenxiu, were imprisoned in the woodshed in the garden of Zhou, it was also thanks to this sister-in-law that they did not starve to death. Now that she saw her sister-in-law fall into the enemy's hands, her heart couldn't help but pound, and she hurriedly turned to look at her stoic-faced younger cousin. Arbor frowned and said coldly, "You can't run away. Let go of your hostage and kneel down." At this moment, the people walking up and down the street had also noticed the black-clothed man holding the weak woman by the neck at the gate of the garden of Zhou. Looking at his attire, everyone couldn't help but jump in fright. Although they were somewhat afraid, as they fled far away, they could not help but secretly hide in a corner and size up the black-clothed man. In any case, with His Highness the Crown Prince here, nothing major would happen. They could just hide far away and watch. This was what the Crown Prince's diehard fans thought in their hearts. Chapter 3478. Arbor coldly gazed at that black-clothed man, his voice icy as he said, "Still not surrendering?" That man instantly became anxious and hastily clutched the woman's throat, shouting harshly, "I want you to immediately let me out of the city, let me out of the city." What kind of joke was this? He barely managed to keep his life, so of course he had to return alive. He didn't believe that His Highness the Crown Prince, the Crown Princess, would disregard the lives of her subjects and disregard the lives of others. As long as he gambled correctly, he could survive this time. The black-clothed man hastily said and clutched that delicate woman's neck, retreating several steps. "You won't let me go? Then I'll kill her immediately. Go ahead and kill her." Arbor sneered, his eyes as chilling as ice pearls, causing people to involuntarily be alarmed. "It's her honor to be able to sacrifice herself for our Mo kingdom. The royal family of the Mo kingdom will erect a monument for her and inscribe inscriptions to extol her noble character." Everyone, why was the little crown princess's expression so frosty and terrifying when she said these words? She spoke as if it was true. Everyone's hearts couldn't help but tighten, and they sneaked several glances at the crown princess. However, they couldn't discern any abnormality from the crown princess's face. "You!" The black-clothed man's face flushed red, and he couldn't resist shouting furiously. He repeatedly threatened, "Hurry and let me go. I'm not joking with you. I can promise you that as long as you let me go, I definitely won't harm this woman in the slightest." Arbor coldly stared at the man in front of him, watching as his mouth opened and closed non-stop. "As long as you're willing to let me go, I can guarantee that I won't set foot on Seacombe Planet for the rest of my life." "I said you can't run." Before the man could finish swearing, Arbor's aloof voice interrupted him. The little stoic coldly gazed at the man in front of her. "Do you not understand human speech? Or are you saying you want to die in a different way? If you let her go now, I can still let you die peacefully and smoothly. Otherwise, you won't even have the chance to die. At that time, you might beg me, and you won't be able to die even if you want to." Arbor's cold gaze fell on the man. His voice was calm and indifferent as usual. "Don't blame me for not warning you beforehand." The black-clothed man's eyes shrank in horror as he hurriedly defended himself. "No, I don't want to die, Crown Princess. I didn't come to Seacombe Planet to cause trouble on purpose. I was also instructed by someone." The black-robed man stuttered as he tried to explain, but he didn't know what he was talking about. The words that came out of his mouth were so pale and powerless. Even his explanation seemed to be completely to shift the blame. There was no substantial persuasiveness at all. The Crown Princess, said you can't leave today, so you can't leave." Arbor interrupted him coldly and frowned impatiently. "If you still persist in going about things the wrong way, then don't blame me, the Crown Princess, for being merciless." The black-clothed man's eyes instantly widened as he looked at her in horror. "No, why you're lying to me." "Ah!" Suddenly, a white figure swiftly scuttled over and bit the webbing between his thumb and index finger at lightning speed. He instantly felt his hand go numb, and his entire arm drooped down. The long sword fell to the ground with a clang. His eyes were filled with terror. Chapter 3479. Huifeng swiftly pulled the delicate woman from the burly man's side and directly pushed her back. The woman also seemed to have been scared silly and fell on her butt, unable to utter a single word for a long time. Seeing this, Pu Rulan felt that her sister-in-law was very pitiful and quickly went up to support her arm. She repeatedly called out, "Sister-in-law, are you all right? Eldest sister-in-law." The delicate woman finally regained her wits. When she thought of the danger just now, tears instantly welled up in her eyes. Don't touch her. Zhou Yuan's mother rushed over and swatted Pu Rulan's arm away, glaring hatefully at her. I don't need your fake kindness. If it weren't for a woman like you being so vicious, how could my daughter have experienced such a dangerous situation just now? You're the one who should be captured. Zhou Yuan's mother indignantly scolded, you're also the one who should die. Xiao Wenxiu had always been a timid person, but at this time, she couldn't help but be angered by Zhou Yuan's mother until her blood boiled. Seeing the old woman humiliating her daughter like this, Xiao Wenxiu rushed up. She didn't know where the strength came from, but she slapped the old woman's face. Ah! Zhou Yuan's mother angrily widened her eyes, as if she wanted to eat someone. Before she could make a fuss, she was kicked flat on her face by a purple forest guard and dragged to the side. Haven't you shouted enough? The purple forest guard impatiently scolded, behave yourself. The crown princess hasn't said how she's going to deal with you. Just wait. Zhou Yuan's mother instantly wilted like a frosted eggplant. When she recalled the scene of her family making a fuss in front of the Qiao clan, she couldn't help but secretly regret it. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have made a fuss. Great, now she had angered the crown princess and gotten herself into trouble for no reason. The black-clothed man's face was ashen, and he repeatedly retreated a few steps with an ashen expression. He anxiously said, Crown Princess, you can't kill me. I'm from the Shi clan, the Shi clan of the 6 great patrician families. Our Shi clan's smelting skills are unparalleled in the world. The man took a step back, and his gaze followed the sword pointed at his throat. He only saw the little girl's pair of cold and lonely eyes looking at him emotionlessly. The Shi family? She said coldly. When I return to the divine prefecture, the Shi family will have to pay the price. What 6 great aristocratic families or 8 great aristocratic families? Do you think you can get away unscathed after touching my family? What a joke. The man panicked and waved his hands as he shouted, You can't kill me. You can't kill me. Arbor smirked and sneered, I know you want to die in a different way. Chirp chirp. The little girl calmly called out. Chirp. The little white squirrel excitedly grew in size with a bang. Like a small mountain, it suddenly pressed down on the man's body. Ah! Caught off guard, the brawny man was scared out of his wits before he died. How could he have expected that the cute little white squirrel hanging in front of him would actually then, he sat down on her body. Just like that, it completely pressed him down. He was a dignified 10th level spiritual master, but under the little white squirrel's thick butt, he only had half an arm exposed to struggle for a bit before he completely died. Fuck, this really was an undignified way to die. Everyone couldn't help but secretly curse in their hearts. They carefully stole glances at the expressionless little crown princess. Chapter 3480. Alright, the young crown princess seemed to have already reminded this lord before. She had even asked him again and again if he wanted a different way of dying, but he did not listen. Everyone could not help but sigh and shake their heads. Soon after, they heard the crown princess coldly say, Banish the Zhou family to the bitterly cold lands of the northwest. In this lifetime, they are not allowed to return to the Mo kingdom capital. Zhou Yuan plopped down on the ground, staring blankly at this stoic-faced crown prince consort whose face was filled with indifference. He muttered, No, you can't treat us like this. You can't do this. Arbor swept a glance over him. Oh. You don't want to be banished. That is to say, you want to die a bit more quickly. Colluding with the enemy, betraying the country, leading the wolf into the house, harboring the enemy. Arbor's cold and desolate voice clearly fell into the ears of Zhou Yuan's family. Don't want to be banished. Do you want to die? Zhou Yuan's mother turned pale with fright and widened her eyes. She hastily crawled forward and covered her son's mouth with one hand. At this moment, she finally regained her wits. Just how stupid of a thing had she done before? Watching the young crown princess turn around and leave, the old woman opened her mouth but was unable to make a sound for a long time. She did not dare to make a fuss again. The young crown princess was clearly a little fellow who could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. If she dared to make a fuss in front of her again, her end would only be more miserable and tragic. Thinking of this, Zhou Yuan's family was like a defeated rooster, their heads drooping as they were escorted away. Pu Rulan sighed in relief and secretly clasped her hands with her mother, Qiao Wenxiu. In the future, when this family left the capital, their days should be much smoother. At least they would not have to constantly face this disgusting family. However, Pu Rulan sighed and glanced back at her sister-in-law. She pitied her delicate and weak sister-in-law. Life in the bitterly cold lands of the northwest would probably not be easy. Qiao Wenxiu shook her head and also sighed. This Miss Gao is truly unlucky. She was the daughter of a wealthy family, but in the future, she would have to follow Zhou Yuan and his family to the bitter cold of the northwest and be sent to work. However, Qiao Wenxiu only sighed a little and then put away the trace of sympathy that occasionally appeared. To put it bluntly, these people had only themselves to blame. In the future, the mother and daughter should just live their own lives and not think too much about other things. That night, the palace banquet held by the old great king was very lively. All the officials and their families were gathered together, and it could be considered a joyous and harmonious atmosphere. Nothing strange happened all the way until they left in the middle of the night. This made all the officials who were on tenterhooks sincerely shed tears of sympathy for themselves. They were truly frightened by this banquet. He still remembered that every time the great king held a banquet, there would always be all kinds of situations. Today's palace banquet was truly smooth and beautiful. During this time, a small incident occurred. The 10th Princess Moli proposed a toast to the Crown Princess and accidentally spilled wine on the Crown Princess. Apart from this, the entire banquet passed without any disturbances. It was so peaceful that these officials did not dare to believe their eyes. After the banquet, Arbor and the Crown Prince led the Qiao family back to the Eastern Palace. Along the way, he saw Mo Lian frown. Arbor could not help but glance at her curiously. Why are you always frowning? Today, Moli proposed a toast to you and intentionally spilled wine on you. Chapter 3481. Why did you stop me when I wanted to berate her? Prince Mo asked in displeasure. It's nothing more than a girl's little tricks, Arbor said dryly, her eyes rippling. There's no need to get angry at her for these kinds of little tricks. She put on an act and said she wanted to lure you to change clothes. Wasn't it all premeditated? Why do these women always like to play these tricks? Prince Mo couldn't help but get angry. The two of them were currently in the same carriage, so only Huifeng and a few other personal guards were accompanying them, so they could hear what they were saying. The Qiao family was in the carriage behind them. Father and second uncle were already dead drunk and were currently snoring in the carriage. Arbor couldn't help but chuckle, and she reached out to pinch his angry handsome face. All right, it's all child's tricks. No need to pay attention to them. At her current level, a few inexplicable plots and machinations actually didn't count for much. In the face of absolute strength, she could just crush those small conflicts that couldn't be seen in public. There was no need to get angry. I think she's living too comfortably. Mo Lian said angrily. In any case, he wouldn't allow anyone to have crooked thoughts about him, Jojo. He couldn't even bear to let her suffer the slightest bit of grievance, so why should she be bullied by others? Arbor couldn't help but chuckle. She then grabbed his hand and blinked. I heard that when the enemy came from the divine prefecture, the 10th princess was humiliated before you rushed to the royal palace. After the incident, she seemed to have sought death the night she returned to the palace. If she really didn't want to live, she could have died that night, Mo Lian said apathetically. To put it bluntly, everything was merely an act in order to gain the old great king's attention and pity in hopes of obtaining more benefits. He understood this father of his too well. Although he was a repulsive person who lost his mind due to lust, he had always been benevolent toward his children. Arbor glanced at the crown prince's disdainful gaze and couldn't help burrowing into his embrace with a chuckle. She moved her little head and comforted, "All right. We're all going back tomorrow. Why do you have to be angry with your insensible sister? Anyway, we won't have many chances to meet in the future. When I come back in a few years, she might have already been married off. Naturally, we won't have to meet again. I must teach her a lesson." Prince Mo said coldly. Arbor raised his head and looked at him. His big eyes curved as he casually advised, "I think she must be angry that this happened because of me. In fact, it was indeed our Qiao family that caused her to be humiliated. It's just a trivial matter. We're leaving tomorrow, so don't bother with her anymore." Humph! Prince Mo reached out and hugged her, his chin rubbing against her little head. "You have a good temper. I have to tell mother to marry off this troublesome girl as soon as possible, so that you won't be wronged when we come back in the future." Arbor looked at him speechlessly. He reached out to hold his face and said softly, "A girl's marriage is extremely important. Don't get involved. Just ignore her in the future. She's your sister after all, so you don't have to be too harsh on her." Mo Lien's eyes brightened. He reached out to hug his little wife and said with a smile, "All right then, I'll listen to my wife." When his wife said that a girl's marriage was extremely important, she looked at him with bright eyes, as if there were stars shining in them. It almost melted his heart. Chapter 3482. After returning to the Eastern Palace that night, Arbor asked Mo Lien to set up a defensive barrier and sent his family members directly into Paradise Planet. After helping her father and second uncle sober up, Xiao Mu led her joyous family members on a tour around Paradise Planet. Then, he took some time to chat with senior sister Su Shanshan before instructing her to take her medicine and go to bed quickly. Early the next morning, Arbor and Mo Lien bade farewell to the Empress Dowager, the Great King, Empress Zhao, and the others, and left Sikong Planet. This trip to and fro between Sikong Planet and the Divine Continent, riding the crimson firmament blue waves, was simply a walk in the park. It didn't take long for them to return to Qinghua City. Now that their family members had been brought back to them, Arbor and Mo Lien were naturally much more relaxed. After arriving at Qinghua City, Arbor simply let the Qiao family members out of Paradise Planet and took them to eat and drink along the way, admiring the scenery around Qinghua City as they leisurely headed in the direction of Dragon Flame City. No one was happier than little Qiao Senator along the way. He felt so blissful that he was practically bubbling. If it weren't for the fact that it was early every morning, the little monk would definitely nag him to wake up and accompany him to recite sutras. No, read books. He felt that his days would be even happier. The green hills were far away, and the clouds were floating lightly. It was already May, and the weather was gradually getting hotter. At noon, the scorching sun would be in the sky, and the sunlight spared no effort to shine on the earth, causing wisps of steam to rise. The Qiao family party followed the Crown Prince and Xiao Mu on a scenic tour, stopping here and there. After nearly half a month's time, they finally arrived 1.5 kilometers away from the outskirts of Dragon Flame City. Xiao Sen excitedly peeked his little face out of the carriage curtains and looked around curiously. He pointed at the tall gate in front of them and exclaimed, "I see the words Dragon Flame City. This child." Wei Ziqin helplessly glanced at her son and hurriedly reached out to pull Xiao Sen's little body back. "Sit properly. Don't just sit there all day without a proper posture. Mom, you're always talking about me." Xiao Sen pouted and muttered. Jolin chuckled. "You're like a frisky monkey. If your mother doesn't scold you, who else would she scold?" She called out to her younger brother. She turned her head and saw the little monk holding a vegetable bun and gnawing on it. The bun was very big, and only a pair of black eyes could be seen from behind the bun. He looked a little funny. Jolin couldn't help but reach out and rub his little bald head. He laughed and said, "Little monk, why are you so interesting? Don't take any interest in this little monk." The little monk hurriedly slapped Jolin's hand away and touched his bald head. He said righteously, "This little monk is a person who is devoted to Buddhism. Once I enter the temple, I will be a monk for life." His hand that was holding the vegetable buns was still stained with a lot of grease. When he touched his head, all the grease was smeared on his little head. He immediately jumped up and jumped off the carriage with a cry, giving everyone a fright. Fortunately, the carriage was already in a stopped state, so nothing happened. The little monk shouted, "Benefactress, benefactress." All the way, he hurriedly ran toward the carriage in front of them. Arbor had just gotten off the carriage with Mo Lien when she heard the demonic voice shouting all the way over. Arbor couldn't help but hold her forehead. Immediately, the figure of the little monk appeared in her line of sight. "Benefactress." The little monk immediately rushed to Arbor and hugged her thigh. Chapter 3483. The little fellow called out, "Female benefactor, female benefactor, this little monk's head is oily, it's uncomfortable." Arbor was speechless. Mo Lien snickered and pulled that little monk down from Xiao Xiao's lap. He swayed the little monk in his hand as he asked with a spurious smile, "Benefactress's husband will help you wipe your head?" "No." The little monk immediately rejected her without giving her any face. "I want female benefactor." As they spoke, the city gates suddenly opened and a troop of cavalry rushed out. The leader was a young general dressed in battle armor. His expression was solemn and stern. Hundreds of cavalry quickly arrived beside the group. The leading general hurriedly pulled on the reins and jumped off his horse. He strode forward and cupped his hands in greeting. "This general, Zhongli Ping, greets Crown Prince and Crown Princess." Prince Mo looked deeply at the young general in front of him and nodded. "Where did little General Zhongli go?" "In reply to your highness." Zhongli Ping said very respectfully, "This general is following His Majesty's orders to go to the 10-mile slope to receive a divine pill refiner." Upon hearing this, Xiao Mu sized him up. "Zhongli Ping. Great General Zhongli's son." Previously, at grandfather's banquet, this great General Zhongli was clearly forced by the Crown Prince to go to His Majesty and hand over his resignation letter. Why was his son still working for His Majesty in the imperial court? Zhongli's residence had secretly accumulated many powerful divine realm cultivators deep in the mountains and forests. How could His Majesty tolerate such a person with ulterior motives? Impossible. Then what was the reason that Zhongli Ping was still in the imperial court? Could it be that it had something to do with this divine pill refiner that he was about to receive? Mo Lien gazed deeply at Zhong Liping, inwardly admiring this Zhong Liping's current tranquil appearance. Logically speaking, Prince Mo had forced Zhong Li's family into such a state. When Zhong Liping saw him this time, he should have the look of someone who had met an enemy with eyes filled with hatred. However, this brat did not show any emotion. He was actually able to keep his composure. "Oh. I wonder which divine grade alchemist it is?" Mo Lien asked. Zhong Liping cupped his hands again and said respectfully, "Reporting to your highness, this is this general's distant cousin, Shan Isu, cousin Shan." Mo Lien frowned slightly. Oh. However, he didn't know that the extremely famous young divine grade alchemist actually had such a relationship with the Zhongli clan. Distant cousin? Mo Lien nodded. "Go ahead." "Yes, your highness." Zhong Liping's performance was pretty good. From the beginning to the end, he didn't show any disrespect to the crown princess. Hearing that his highness was letting them go, he respectfully bowed to the couple. Then, he waved his hand and led the 100-man team forward. This person, Zhong Liping, does have some of his father's awe-inspiring presence. Mo Lien commented dryly. It was just that the wives he married were all so stupid. They were all troublemakers who couldn't help. Arbor tilted his little head and took out a clean handkerchief. He carefully wiped the oil stains on little Baldy's head and asked, "Who is Shanisu?" Mo Lien smiled. Shanisu is a rather famous divine-grade alchemist in the 3 continents. She is only 28 years old now. 3 years ago, she entered the divine-grade alchemist sect. Sir Jojo made an "oh" sound and didn't say anything else. Mo Lien lowered his head to look at his little emperor and pulled her into his embrace. Chapter 3484. His action was so sudden that he brought the little monk, who was in Lady Qiao Qiao's hands, into his bosom. Jojo is much more formidable than her. Crown Prince Lien felt that he needed to let his wife know that in his heart, no formidable pill refiner could compare to his little emperor. Arbor cast a glance at him and didn't bother to speak. Squeezed between the two of them, the little Baldy grumbled unhappily, Benefactress's husband, can you two not squeeze this little monk? This little monk still has oil on his head. Aren't we wiping it for you?" Arbor grumpily cupped his little round head and wiped it a few more times. "Okay, it's out of oil." The little monk raised his hand to rub his head before nodding in satisfaction. "Benefactress, this little monk needs to wash his hair properly tonight." Arbor, Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh out loud. "What are you washing your hair for? With your bald head and photon brain, you just need to wipe it with a rag every day." Sir Jojo pursed his lips in amusement. He reached out to pick up the little monk, whose face was puffed up like a bun, and quickly walked to the side of the carriage before jumping onto it. The group successfully passed through Dragon Flame City's checkpoint. Arbor took her parents and family to a garden-style residence on Changle North Street. This residence was one of the 5 properties she had won from Wu Rochuan during her grandfather's birthday banquet. It was a space ring she had won from her. The space ring just happened to store some talisman puppets and elixir pills, which she handed to little Sixth Zheng and the huge bear squad. This residence was just right for her parents and family to live in. It was also close to her Kaidai Pavilion and precious painting workshop. Changle Main Street was also a bustling area where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. Even this medium-sized garden-style residence located here was also worth a lot. The Qiao family's arrival was sudden. Fortunately, they had hired someone to clean this residence for a long time, so the environment was relatively clean. This residence was still smaller than the Marquis of Jiayuan's estate that they used to live in, but it was enough for a family to live in. The courtyard was also exquisitely renovated. There were pavilions, terraces, pavilions, and playhouses. The environment looked very comfortable and elegant. The family moved into the new residence and naturally took some time to tidy up. Wei Ziqin saw that the sky was gradually darkening and urged her daughter to quickly return to the palace with the crown prince to rest. Anyway, it wouldn't be good to tidy it up in a day or two. They planned to stay here first and tidy it up slowly later. When he was free, he would go to the broker house and buy 2 servants, and everything would be on the right track. Not long after the young couple returned to the Eastern Palace, a young eunuch hurriedly came to deliver a message, saying that His Majesty urgently summoned the Crown Prince for an audience. Mo Lien reluctantly let go of his wife and went to report to his father's extreme time hall. Arbor, on the other hand, took a combat bath. He was so tired that he lay on the bed and rolled around. The past few days had been really thrilling. Fortunately, this half a month of sightseeing had soothed his anxious heart quite a bit. Arbor lay on the bed, thinking that he might be able to receive the 100,000 blank jade slips tomorrow. He also had to go to Fish Orchid Planet to draw talismans. Recently, his realm had stabilized quite a bit. It was time to advance to the next level. As he thought about it, he fell asleep in a daze. In the middle of the night, he suddenly woke up with a start. He reached out to touch the empty and cold bedding beside him. He rolled over and sat up, his little face immediately puffing up. Jojo's lotus was gone. Chapter 3485. Sir Jojo jumped down and put on a coat. Kai Xiu, who heard the noise at the door, carefully pushed open the door and walked in. Arbor was stunned and casually asked, "Why aren't you sleeping?" Kai Xiu heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly walked up and said in a low voice, "Crown Princess, why did you suddenly wake up?" "Lien is gone." Sir Jojo muttered unhappily. Kai Xiu couldn't help but pursed her lips and chuckled. Crown Prince was called to the study by His Majesty. "Crown Princess, have you forgotten? What time was it already?" There were so many things to discuss. Arbor's pair of round almond eyes couldn't help but slightly narrowed. "You're saying that after His Majesty called Crown Prince over, he didn't let him come back?" Kai Xiu coughed lightly. "His Highness sent someone to pass the message back. But he saw that Crown Princess was asleep yesterday, so he didn't disturb you. Crown Prince was entrusted by His Majesty to go to the 10-mile slope to help little General Zhongli pick up a divine-grade pill master." Arbor couldn't help but be startled, following which a trace of anger surged in her eyes. "Pick up someone in the middle of the night? Didn't that Zhongli Ping already left the city in the evening to pick up that pill master called Shan Yisu? Could it be that he waited until the middle of the night and still hadn't come back? What was it? This person was brought to the Sea of Forgetfulness, right? Was there such a long journey?" Seeing that the little Crown Princess was angry, Kai Xiu hurriedly said in a gentle voice, "Seems like something happened at the 10-mile slope. That pill master and little General Zhongli were blocked by a group of bandits at the 10-mile slope and couldn't come out." "Bandits?" Arbor seemed to have heard a big joke and couldn't help but raise her voice slightly. "These bandits are really quite interesting. They came all the way from Qinyu border city and didn't even bump into a single bandit. They also passed through the 10-mile slope and didn't bump into anything. Once this pill master passed through, he was immediately surrounded by bandits. It turned out that bandits also treated people well." At this time, Kai Xiu had already helped Arbor put on his clothes and tidied them up properly. Seeing the little Crown Princess about to go out with her long hair, she hurriedly pulled her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "This servant will help you tidy up your hair a little." "Crown Princess, are you going to the 10-mile slope now? From what I can see, it's almost dawn. I'm afraid that the Crown Prince and General Zhongli will be back soon. Why don't we wait a little longer?" Jojo's expression was a little uncertain. Just as she pushed open the door, she saw Tong, who was guarding the door, turn around and bow to her. At this time, the sky was just beginning to brighten. The red sun in the east had not completely jumped out of the horizon. Only a small part of its head was exposed, reflecting a touch of sunset on the horizon. Sir Jojo's expression was unperturbed. He clasped his hands behind his back and asked crisply, "Where's Lotus?" "He's not back yet. This guy is really looking down on the little emperor more and more. He actually dared to stay out all night without saying a word." Tong laughed embarrassedly and hurriedly said, "His Highness the Crown Prince has just sent a message back. He will definitely be back in the palace in an hour." Jojo puffed up his little face and heavily snorted. He turned around and pattered towards the direction of the main hall. Kai Xiu glanced at Tong and gave him a look that said, "Let His Highness fend for himself." She hurriedly followed the little Crown Princess' footsteps. Until Arbor finished a tasteless breakfast, she found that the guy who said he would be back in an hour was still nowhere to be seen. She was furious. Chapter 3486. She packed her small bag, carried a pile of things, and called for someone to send her back to the Chiao residence on Changle North Street. When Sir Jojo arrived, the whole family had just woken up and were having breakfast in the dining room. When they heard that Jojo was back, they hurriedly ran out to welcome her. They saw the little girl standing in the middle of the courtyard under the bright morning sun. Her little face was tense as she ordered the accompanying servants to move boxes of things inside. Wei Ziqin was delighted when she saw her. She went forward and hugged her daughter. "My good daughter, why are you here so early in the morning? Didn't I tell you to rest well?" "Mother, I'm moving back to stay for a few days." Sir Jojo's words made everyone look at each other in dismay. Miss Chiao asked the servants to carry the boxes to her courtyard. When they came back yesterday, they had already divided the courtyards. Her pear blossom courtyard was next to her parents' courtyard. It was slightly smaller, but it was the most exquisite courtyard in the entire residence. Wei Ziqin blinked and turned to look at her husband. They both faintly felt that the little girl seemed to be angry. What happened? Why didn't they see little Mo? Xiao Zhongbang winked at his wife, meaning that she should hurry over and ask her daughter what happened. Wei Ziqin glanced at him and then went forward to hold Arbor's little hand. She asked with a smile, "Jojo, you can stay as long as you want as long as you want. You can stay as long as you want, but where is Xiao Mo? Why didn't he come back with you? He didn't come back last night." Arbor was furious. He went to pick up a woman and didn't come back to sleep the whole night. He said he would be back in an hour, but Jojo waited until breakfast was cold. "I didn't see him." "What?" Everyone in the Chiao residence, including second uncle and little Huzi, couldn't help but shout. This little Mo was too unreliable. How could he leave Jojo at home just to pick up another woman? What a bastard. Xiao Zhongbang and Xiao Zhongxing were furious. "Where is he? Second uncle, let's find him and beat him up." As second uncle Xiao said the word theory, his eyes clearly revealed that he wanted to beat classmate Xiaomo up. Sir Jojo pursed his lips and snorted. "Who knows where he is now?" After saying that, she angrily ordered people to move the things into her pear blossom courtyard. She angrily waited for a while. When it was almost noon, she only received a message from Lietong, who was trembling with fear. His Highness said that he would be back later and asked the Crown Princess to have lunch first. Xiao Mu promptly shut the person outside with a bang before entering Paradise Planet in a flash. Poor Prince Mo rushed to the Qiao family in the afternoon. As soon as he returned to the Eastern Palace, he found out that the young Crown Princess had been angered and returned to her maiden home. He secretly complained incessantly and hurriedly rushed to the Qiao family without stopping. In the end, he was almost given the cold shoulder. Fortunately, his mother-in-law truly pitied this poor thing and turned a blind eye. She had Kai Xiu open the back door and secretly let him in. Mo Yen went to the pear blossom courtyard and found that Jojo wasn't there at all. She immediately knew that this little guy must have been angered back to Paradise Planet and might have gone into closed-door cultivation. This fellow complained incessantly and cursed his unreliable father and 18 generations of ancestors in his heart. If his father hadn't insisted on discussing the Greyfield village matter with him, how could he have delayed coming back to see his wife until so late? See, his precious little wife was unhappy. Chapter 3487. This fellow's heart was actually in a mess. He didn't know what exactly his wife was angry about. However, he had a strong desire to live. As long as his wife was angry, it was all his fault. Since he wanted to enter Paradise Planet, he had to admit his mistake to his wife. In the end, he summoned Little Tree, but there was no response. She started to panic a little. Oh no, his wife was really angry this time. She must have told Little Tree not to bring him into Paradise Planet. Mo Lien couldn't come up with a solution no matter how he thought about it, so he could only ruthlessly threaten the sapling. After coaxing and pestering for a long time, he finally entered. Just as he entered Paradise Planet, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's figure flashed and he came to his side with a smile. He looked like he was watching a good show. "What's wrong? Did you make the little girl angry? Where's my Jojo?" "Ha!" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes. "Let me tell you. Jojo is really angry this time. You didn't come home last night. The situation is very serious. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal chuckled as he followed behind him. Jojo doesn't want to see you anymore. Mo Lien turned to look at him. Jojo went into seclusion to cultivate. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal raised his head smugly. You want to see her? That depends on whether our Jojo is happy to see you. Mo Lien really wanted to slap this guy, but she controlled herself. She turned and dashed in the direction of the bamboo house. Jojo. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal blocked him with his small fan. Hey, I already said that Jojo went to cultivate. Don't tell me you want to disturb her. Alright, alright. Seeing how pitiful you are, I'll show you the way. What about you? Wait here obediently for our Xiao Xiao. After you see Jojo, you must behave properly. Mo Lien glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. After the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal finished his long-winded speech, he turned around and realized that Mo Lien had already disappeared without a trace. Humph, if you don't listen to what I have to say, you deserve to be rejected by Jojo. Arbor was sitting on a small bed in the bamboo house, cultivating by himself with the door closed. When she opened her eyes, a glimmer of light entered her eyes. Subconsciously, he used his divine sense to check his meridians and found that his 9-branch meridians were now filled with spiritual power like streams. She raised her hand and quickly shot out a stream of spiritual energy. That stream of water spiritual energy revealed a dense chill. It directly turned into an icicle in front of her, hanging upside down in front of her eyes. When Mo Lien pushed the door open, she saw the little fellow standing under the sharp icicle hanging from the ceiling, looking up at the icicle. The bright white light contrasted with the cold glint in the depths of her eyes, giving Crown Prince Mo a bad premonition at once. He hurried to his wife's side in a flash. Just as he was about to reach out to hug her, she dodged him. Mo Lien was a little anxious at once. He hurried to her side again, reached out, and hurriedly carried the little fellow who was bristling with anger. He cried out repeatedly, "Wife, hubby admits his mistake. Wife, I was wrong. Hubby shouldn't have stayed out all night and shouldn't have let you stay in the cold bed. Punish me to kiss you as many times as you like." Arbor glanced at him, looking at him expressionlessly. Get lost. Mo Lien, Jojo, it's because something happened at the last minute and Imperial Father kept me here to talk about it for a long time. Ask me, I'll confess to anything you ask. Chapter 3488. The man tilted his head and rubbed it against the top of her head. Jojo, I won't hide anything from you. Ask me anything you want to know. Last night, because of that Sue something, you stayed out all night and didn't come back at all. This was unbearable. Xiao Mu's small face was taut as she roared at him in anger out of humiliation. Mo Lien blinked his eyes and immediately understood. His wifey was probably angry because of this unlined garment. Because he didn't come back at night, his little wife mistakenly thought that he had delayed coming back to sleep because of the Sue thing. He hurriedly shook his head and raised a hand above his head as he swore, I swear, Jojo, I didn't stay out all night because of her. Then Kai Xiu said that you went to pick her up. Yes. Mo Lien didn't dare to hide anything at this time and hurriedly soothed his little wife's anger. He nodded and said, it's true that I helped pick her up, but after I came back, I stayed in the palace and was kept in the study by Imperial Father. Kai Xiu. Prince Mo turned around and roared as usual. Kai Xiu, this girl, how did she pass on the message? Look at how angry his wife was. Then he realized, this wasn't the Eastern Palace at all. This was Paradise Planet. Where did Kai Xiu come from? Don't you dare yell at Kai Xiu. The little fellow slapped his hand away in annoyance, her almond eyes bulging. What's the matter? Your father still wants to keep you for the night, what's there to discuss? Mo Lien didn't dare to laugh, but the little wife in front of him was fuming and trying hard to maintain her stoic expression. She was really a little adorable. This husband swears. I really stayed in the palace. Mo Lien hurriedly explained, stubborn Chao, Wu Xiaoyin, Imperial Censor Wang, and the other court officials are also in the discussion. I can call them all over. Arbor snorted, the little flame in her heart subsiding a few inches. What happened? Your father is really unreliable. She had just returned to the Eastern Palace, and yet another trouble had come. It was as if he was the only one in the world who could do the job. Wouldn't Lien die of exhaustion? Initially, he thought that the emperor was a reliable person, but from the looks of it, he was no different from old Wang of the Mo kingdom. Both of them liked to enslave their sons. Mo Lien heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that his wife's anger had subsided. He hugged her tightly and lowered his head to kiss her. Wife, you don't know how annoying our father is. When something happened in Greyfield village, the first person he thought of was me. He also asked me to go to the village to settle some matters. He said that he wants me to leave tomorrow. What? Xiao Mu roared, unable to remain calm. Her Lien had just returned to the capital. Why did he have to go out on a mission again? I already said that I don't want to go, but my father kept glaring at me as if he expected better from me. He even nagged all day long, saying that a man should aspire to travel far and not follow his wife around and fool around with you all day long. I'm not fooling around. My Jojo isn't fooling around at all. The two spoke at the same time, then looked at each other. Arbor finally couldn't hold back her laughter. She turned her little head and snorted softly. Mo Lien saw that his little wife was finally smiling. He quickly reached out to pull her over and sat down on the bamboo stool beside him. Jojo, there was a large-scale zombie attack in Greyfield village. It happened a few days ago, and it's quite serious. Chapter 3489. The day after tomorrow, I'll really go to Greyping village. I'll go too. Our wedding date is set for the 6th of June. It's less than a month away. Mo Lien rubbed her head gloomily. You have to stay. You have to prepare the wedding dress and jewelry as soon as possible. Also, the Ministry of Rites will often bring over some things that need to be added for you to look over. Arbor frowned. Thinking that this was indeed the case, she couldn't help but nod slightly. All right then. Thinking that Jojo's lotus was going to leave Dragon Flame City for a while, the little fellow's mood instantly turned sour. However, the matter of the corpse puppet could not be delayed. She did not continue to obstruct him, but her eyes were a little listless. Whenever Mo Lien spoke, she would somewhat ignore him. Mo Lien couldn't help but find it amusing. Then, he pulled her into his arms and said softly, Jojo, you have to think of me. Do you know? When I think of leaving the capital the day after tomorrow and being separated from you for a period of time, I feel especially bad. Arbor didn't say anything. She just glanced at him listlessly. But don't worry. I'll definitely rush back by June at the latest. Definitely. Arbor turned her head and raised her hand to wrap around his neck. She asked in a muffled voice, so from midnight until morning last night, you've been in the study discussing this matter with the courtiers? About the corpse puppet in Greyping village? Mo Lien nodded. Arbor immediately reached out to cover his eyes. You didn't sleep the whole night. Mo Lien smiled slightly and gently pulled her little hand down. He gazed deeply at her, as if wanting to imprint her exquisite features in the depths of his heart. Jojo, nothing is more important than you. You have to stay here well. You have to make me feel at ease, okay? Arbor glanced at him and said in a muffled voice, what can happen to me? You, on the other hand, have gone to such a dangerous place. Don't mess around in everything. I'll make more elixirs for you tomorrow. Bring them along. All right. Is the news from Greyfield Village reliable? Arbor suddenly asked. Mo Lien nodded. Reliable. The news was brought back by that alchemist. She came from Greyfield Village. Since that place was surrounded by a large number of zombies, how did she get to the capital safely? Arbor asked suspiciously. Didn't you say that she was surrounded by bandits at Shirley Slope? Arbor snorted. If they could break out of the encirclement of a large group of zombies, how could a few hundred bandits be a problem for them? Yes, this matter is also quite suspicious. Mo Lien also nodded, but she couldn't help but complain in her heart. But I've already sent people to investigate. I won't be able to receive any news in a short period of time. Mo Lien looked at her and smiled. Jojo is right. An expert alchemist who came out of a nest of zombies doesn't look like someone who would be surrounded by bandits. So they were luring you over yesterday? Arbor said coldly. Yesterday, didn't that Joan Liping go to pick up that alchemist? Why did he encounter bandits at Shirley Slope? The bandits at Shirley Slope were there. They didn't rob us when they saw our carriage pass by. Oh, when they saw us pass by, they suddenly jumped out to surround us and rob us? Moreover, Joan Liping brought a few hundred people yesterday. They couldn't even take down a small bandit nest, so why did they have to call you over? Chapter 3490. No matter how you look at it, it's comical. Arbor concluded. Prince Mo could only nod at his wife's outburst, agreeing that what she said made sense. I don't like that pill refiner, Sir Jojo said angrily. I feel that she's purely looking for trouble. Mo Lien's eyes brightened, and he immediately hugged his wifey as he cheerfully said, Ciao ciao, ciao ciao, don't worry. Even if that pill refiner's pill refining skills are better than yours for the time being, hubby still won't fancy her. His Jojo cared about him more and more. He was happy. Arbor glared at him unhappily. Do you think I'm jealous of her? She only felt that this woman's motives weren't pure. Although they hadn't met yet, why did she feel that this woman was a bit pretentious? She brought the news of Greyfield Village to the Emperor so that she could show off her skills in front of the Emperor. How was being able to enter and exit a zombie lair unscathed all by herself not a skill? But she pretended to be weak and asked for help at the 10-mile slope. She even wanted Jojo's lotus to save her. No matter how he looked at it, he didn't like it. Was she pretending to be strong or weak? What a contradictory woman. He couldn't understand her. Mo Lien kissed his wife hard and said with a grin, Who does my wife need to be jealous of? My wife is the best. Arbor glanced at him as if looking at an idiot. She snorted and said, You're not hiding anything from me, right? Mo Lien shook his head, but he kept muttering in his heart. Heavens! His wife's brain really wasn't for show. She was really smart. She could guess the whole story just by looking at the signs. She was so smart that it made him happy and distressed. Actually, when Mo Lien arrived at the 10-mile slope, he knew at first glance that the pill refiner had teamed up with Joan Liping to scheme against him. With their abilities, it was impossible for them to be trapped by a mere 100 bandits in a place like the 10-mile slope. She was only putting on such an act to lure him into a trap and meet him first. How could the Crown Prince take the bait? Thinking that she was being pretentious, the Crown Prince immediately brought his men back to the palace. Therefore, other than this point, Mo Lien didn't hide anything else from Xiao Qiao. He had indeed reached the 10-mile slope, but he immediately returned to the palace within 3 minutes. However, he was left in the study by the great emperor to discuss matters until dawn. Wife, don't think so much in the future, okay? Hubby is here for everything. Mo Lien stood up with her in his arms, and the two walked out of the bamboo building. At the same time, he came face to face with the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was waving a small fan, immediately glared at Mo Lien. He pointed at Mo Yen with his fan and shouted in a huff, "Xiao Xiao, why are you paying attention to him so quickly? I was still thinking about how to leave this brat hanging for half a day." Mo Yen instantly glared at him in annoyance. She pulled Jojo's little hand and said, "Jojo, don't listen to his slander." Arbor tugged at his little hand, but failed to pull it out of Mo Yen's grasp. He simply raised his hand and swiped at the air in front of him. In the halo of his demonic eyes, the scenery faded and the scene at the Qiao residence's main entrance appeared. A gorgeously dressed woman walked out of the carriage with the help of someone. She raised her head and looked at the Qiao residence's lintel. A cold smile flashed across her eyes. Arbor looked at the figure in the halo. She looks a little familiar. Of course she looks familiar. My Jojo, on the day of your grandfather's birthday banquet, didn't you release a debt? There, it's that stewardly from the pink house. She's here now. Chapter 3491. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was enjoying the show, waved his little fan and blinked his beautiful eyes, smiling happily. Jojo, how do you plan to deal with them? Do you need my help? He was so bored that he wanted to help Jojo beat them up. Arbor retracted the light from his demonic eyes and glanced at the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, then at Mo Yen. He asked with a puzzled expression, when did I owe them a debt? The two of them, the little fellow looked confused. Why was it so funny? It looked like this fellow had completely forgotten about the incident with Stewardly of the Pink House. Jojo, 5% for every 2 hours. Mo Yen reminded him in amusement. Arbor's brain finally connected. His eyes lit up and he nodded repeatedly. Oh. Right, it's that big idiot. Mo Yen and Hu Jinchen exchanged a look and almost burst out laughing. Hearing this, they nodded and said, right, it's that big idiot. Arbor and the two of them left the galaxy together and pushed open the door with small steps. Wei Ziqin, Qiao Zhongbang, and the others were drinking tea in the little garden and staring at their daughter's door. The moment she saw her, Wei Ziqin hurriedly stood up to greet her. Jojo. Second Uncle Qiao also jumped up and ran quickly to Mo Yen. Little Mo, when did you come in? This fellow, didn't the main and second doors close for him? He must have climbed over the wall to get in. Mo Yen glanced at Wei Ziqin pitifully and complained, Mother. Second uncle won't let me in. Wei Ziqin patted his hand in amusement. All right, second uncle, Jojo must be fine now. Look, as she spoke, she gestured angrily in Arbor's direction. Second Uncle Qiao looked and indeed, Sir Jojo's expression seemed much better. It seemed like that stinking brat had coaxed his little niece back. Humph, only then did second uncle drop the subject. At this moment, Jolin hurried over from the other end of the garden path. When he saw everyone, he exclaimed, Father. Someone is coming. The Qiao family members looked at each other. Who's here? Xiao Zhongbang asked suspiciously. After all, their family had just settled down in this house yesterday. On the divine land, they had no relatives or friends. Who could be so well informed? They had just moved into the mansion yesterday, and someone had already come knocking on their door today. It's all right, Father. He's here for me. Arbor said faintly and took the lead to walk towards the gate of the house. Jolin hurriedly caught up with her sister's footsteps and asked curiously, Sister, I see that those people's faces are very ugly, as if someone owes them millions of spirit coins. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal could not help but laugh. It's not someone who owes them money, it's them who owes my Jojo money. How much did you owe in the past 20 days? 5 cents every 2 hours. That's 24 hours a day. Let's count it as 25 days now. I don't even know how much I owe. How much did they lend me? Arbor herself could not remember. 1 million. When Arbor heard this, he was instantly displeased. Why is it only 1,000,000? 5 cents every 2 hours. 20 days isn't that much. Everyone, Arbor's group entered the hall in a grandiose manner and saw a woman with heavy makeup sitting there with a displeased expression. Steward Lee furtively shrunk his neck and pulled up his sleeves, standing behind the woman with an aged face. Chapter 3492. Seeing that the Crown Princess had brought people in, he immediately jumped up as if he had been electrocuted and shouted, "Grand, Crown Princess! Crown Princess!" Arbor glanced at him and her gaze fell on the woman with heavy makeup. "Who are you?" The woman in front of her was gorgeously dressed. She wore a strapless long dress that outlined her good figure. She wore a large string of sandalwood beads on her hand and a mole at the corner of her mouth, which ruined her good color. Time had already left its mark on her face. Although Sun Yang was still attractive in her middle age, she was no longer as delicate as a young girl. Wearing this peach-colored long dress naturally didn't add any points to her looks. Instead, it seemed unbearably gaudy. Yin Yang stood up and curtsied to Qiao Mu, Mo Lien, and the others in a well-behaved manner. Afterwards, she put on a nonchalant expression and said faintly, "Why does the Crown Prince Consort have to pretend not to recognize us? Haven't you been sending people to the pink brothel to remind us to pay our debts? It's just that the Crown Princess has been gone for more than 20 days. We can't pay our debts even if we want to." It was only then that Xiao Mu recalled that before she left, she had indeed sent someone to remind this pink house's manager not to forget his debt to her from time to time. If she didn't pay up, Sir Jojo definitely wouldn't let it go. When the time came, destroying her pink house would be a light punishment. Arbor nodded. Her figure spun and she sat down at the head of the table. Kai Xiu was very perceptive. She walked forward and handed a debt note to the young Crown Princess. Then she bowed and left. Arbor lowered her head and glanced at the debt note. She nodded and looked at Yin Yang. "You're the lady boss of the pink house." "I don't dare to be the lady boss." "If you're not the lady boss, then why are you looking for me?" Arbor interrupted her self-deprecating words and said impatiently, "I have to find your lady boss to settle this matter. You small fries don't come looking for this Crown Princess to talk nonsense." Everyone was speechless. Yin Yang held her breath in her chest as the veins on her forehead throbbed. She hurriedly said, "Yes, I'm the lady boss of the pink house." "You're the lady boss, and you're saying that you don't dare to accept it?" The little Crown Princess said unhappily. "You're lying. This Crown Princess doesn't like to beat around the bush. If you have something to say, just say it." "Fuck, I don't dare. I was just being polite." You. Why is it so tiring to talk to you?" For the first time in her life, Yin Yang, who had always been smooth and sly, had been angered by a little girl. Everyone could not help but look at her sympathetically, feeling that she was a little pitiful. "Since you're the lady boss, then let's cut the crap." Arbor slammed the note on the table. 30 million spirit coins, pay it. 3. 30 million. Steward Lee's cries were like an old rooster whose neck was being squeezed. His raised voice was practically piercing through the roof. Xiao Mu swept him a displeased glance. "What gall, you actually dare to yell at this Crown Prince Consort?" Steward Lee immediately looked like a defeated rooster. He drooped his head and cried out pitifully, "Crown Princess, this lowly one didn't do it on purpose. This lowly one, it's just too shocking." He had a long face. If crying could solve the problem, he was willing to cry until the sky turned dark. Arbor looked at him impatiently. A grown man being so long-winded. Scram to the side. Chapter 3493. Don't you see that this Crown Princess is talking to your lady boss? Arbor glanced at Manager Lee in annoyance, then turned to Yin Yang and asked indifferently, "How is it? You should know that the time it takes for an incense stick to burn has already passed when I was talking to you. According to the calculation of 5% interest for every 2 hours, you have to pay another sum of interest now." Yin Yang had lived for so many years and had interacted with all kinds of people, but she had never been as sullen as she was today. This little girl's words were really infuriating. She simply had the urge to not say a single word to her. Arbor glanced at her and said unhappily, "What's with that look?" Every time these people spoke a few words to Jojo, they would look very indignant and too lazy to continue talking to Jojo. Humph. If they didn't want to talk, then they wouldn't talk. Then they would chase them away and let them owe more money. Once they had accumulated 100 million in debt, they would directly go to her door and take over her pink building. "Kai Xiu, Kai Chi, see the guest out." "Yes. Crown Princess." Kai Xiu hurriedly walked over with Kai Chi. She faintly said to Yin Yang, "Lady boss, please." Yin Yang was so angry that her nose was about to become crooked. It was Manager Li who hurriedly said in a low voice, "Yin Yang, the longer we owe that debt, the more it will increase." Yin Yang fiercely glared at Manager Li a few times. If it weren't for this guy who foolishly signed that debt, how could he have fallen into such a state? If it weren't for the fact that this guy still had some use for the pink building, she would have chased this guy out long ago and let him fend for himself while he paid the debt himself. Yin Yang took a deep breath, then smiled mockingly at Arbor and said, "Crown Princess, if you have something to say, let's talk nicely. We're not people who don't pay back debts. It's just that your 5% interest, even if it's calculated based on 25 days, isn't right. It's doubled, okay? Husband." Arbor turned to look at her husband. The Crown Prince's mouth twitched, and he coughed lightly. With a straight face, he said sternly, "What do you mean? Are you saying that my Crown Princess can't even do accounting?" Yin Yang couldn't help but want to howl like a wolf. That was because the Crown Princess couldn't calculate the accounts properly, all right? However, she did not dare to contradict the Crown Prince, so she quickly smiled and said, "This commoner did not mean that. The Crown Princess is extremely intelligent. Naturally, she can calculate the accounts clearly. Today, His Highness the Crown Prince was here to support this little Crown Princess. It seemed that she had no choice but to accept this humiliation." Yin Yang took a deep breath and nodded, admitting defeat. "Manager Li, give the spirit coin card to the Crown Princess." With a long face, Manager Li walked to the front of the Crown Princess and bowed as he handed over a spirit coin card. "Crown Princess, the interest plus the principal amount is a total of 31 million spirit coins. It's all in here." The little Crown Princess glanced sideways, and Kai Xiu immediately understood. She stepped forward and took the spirit coin card. After checking the amount, she nodded slightly at the little Crown Princess. After unexpectedly receiving 30 million spirit coins, the young Crown Prince Consort's mood immediately improved. However, there was still no expression on her little face. She faintly glanced at Yin Yang and said coldly, "Give me the list of Hua Clan's debts." Yin Yang was stunned, and her eyes could not help but reveal anger. "Crown Princess, this is too unkind of you. That 30 million was already equivalent to daylight robbery." Chapter 3494. She didn't expect that the Crown Princess still didn't plan on letting them off. Could it be that she wanted to wipe out the 60 million debt of the Mu family's fifth branch's wife, Huane? How could there be such a good thing in this world? Yin Yang had only taken out 30 million spirit coins, so how long would it take for her to earn it back? Now, the Crown Princess wanted to wipe out the 60 million debt with a single sentence. That was simply a lunatic's ravings. "Husband." Sir Jojo turned to look at Mo Lien in a huff. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she maintained a serious expression and continued to help the villain do evil. "Go, invite the capital governor over for this highness. The imperial court has already explicitly prohibited the use of stamp money. This pink house knowingly violated the law. It's simply unforgivable. Go invite the capital governor over and have him handle this matter. Yi Nyang was so angry that her nose kept twitching, and she almost spat out a mouthful of blood from her chest. Good, 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 you high and mighty children of influential families. Right and wrong, black and white, you can twist things back and forth, but this is how you humiliate people. Previously, the crown princess charged her 30 million spirit coins for a 2-hour period of 5% interest. Could it be that it wasn't a usurious stamp money? Now that it was her turn, she was being unreasonable in every way. This was simply preposterous. Arbor glanced at Yi Nyang, who was so angry that her hair was standing on end, and lightly harumphed. It seems that some people simply won't shed tears until they see the coffin. Mo Lien nodded and gave Huifeng, who was standing on the side, a look. Huifeng immediately cupped his hands in acknowledgement and turned to walk out the door. Wait! Yi Nyang hastily stood up and shouted, wait, wait! She was so anxious that her voice trembled slightly. Arbor turned to glance at her and said indifferently, what? Did Lady Boss change her mind? Yi Nyang gritted her teeth and clenched her fists in her sleeves. If she could, she really wanted to pounce over and bite this little crown princess. She was simply a hateful person. Arbor saw that her expression was filled with resentment, but she did not dare to do anything to him. He could not help but secretly laugh in his heart. In all these years, Yi Nyang had never suffered a loss. Unfortunately, she had bumped into an iron plate like Jojo. She was in for it. Yi Nyang took a deep breath and forced a smile. However, the smile on her face was even uglier than crying. Managerly, Yi Nyang called out. The cold sweat on Steward Li's forehead almost dripped down. He hurriedly stepped forward and bowed slightly. Yi Nyang. Find the note of the fifth wife's debt. Manager Li immediately cried out with a long face, but Yi Nyang, the fifth madam owes us more than 60 million spirit coins. This debt isn't a small amount. The mistress of the fifth branch has paid more than 20 million spirit coins, right? Arbor's expression was indifferent as he said, if that's the case, then fine. Husband, let's call stubborn Chow over and let him settle this case. Yi Nyang inwardly gnashed her teeth. The common people did not fight with the rich, and the rich did not fight with the officials. This had been the case since ancient times. She naturally knew that if the capital magistrate was really invited, with the attitude of this black-hearted couple in front of her, they would probably urge the capital magistrate to convict her of a felony. At that time, not to mention that 60 million spirit coins would disappear without a trace, even the pink brothel that she had been operating for many years would probably be lost. Although the pink brothel was merely one of her businesses in the entire Jade Tripod City, it was still one of her businesses. Chapter 3495. However, if the pink brothel that was so well managed was destroyed by the crown prince and his wife just like that, Yi Nyang wouldn't be able to sit still. Yi Nyang took a deep breath and hastily put on a smiling face. She chuckled and said, Crown Princess, there's no need to be angry. It's not that this commoner isn't willing, it's just that fifth madam's debt has been owed for so long that it'll take some time to find it. Stewardly, why haven't you brought fifth madam's debt note yet? Stewardly hastily went back to retrieve the note with a long face. However, he still couldn't figure out what was going on. He clearly came today to find the crown princess to properly reason with her, so how did he end up with Madame Hua's 60 million yuan debt? It was simply inexplicable. However, he was just a lowly steward, so he didn't dare to go against Yi Nyang's wishes. He hastily returned to Amusement Alley and planned to retrieve the note before rushing back without stopping. Just as he exited Amusement Alley, Stewardly saw two voluptuous women dressed extremely flirtatiously. They swayed their waists as they walked towards him. One of them was a woman in her early 20s with slightly tanned skin and a bright red face. She had a slender waist as she walked over with a smile. As soon as she got close to Stewardly, she fell into his arms as if she had no bones. She even let out a coquettish voice that gave people goosebumps. "Stewardly, where are you planning to go in such a hurry?" Seeing that it was this coquettish woman, Stewardly revealed his 2 yellow front teeth and smiled. He casually pinched the woman's body with a moderate amount of force. "Chunner, I'm going out to take care of some matters. I'll have a good chat with you later." The woman named Chun Er in front of him was not beautiful, and her figure was average. However, her skills in bed were not to be underestimated. Chief Stewardly had tasted her twice, and even now, he still felt that he had not had enough. However, he was in a hurry to deal with Yin Yang's matter, so he didn't tease the woman. "Big sister Chunner, look at how hurried Stewardly is. Where is he going?" Xiao Ying-chun coldly watched Stewardly leave in a hurry, and a mocking smile appeared on her lips. She had heard that today, Chief Stewardly accompanied Yin Yang to look for the young crown princess to repay her debt. He must have suffered a bellyful of anger from the crown prince consort at that time. She might have a chance to take advantage of it. When she thought of this, a venomous glint flitted across Xiao Ying-chun's eyes. "Arbor, you have harmed me to this extent, it would be impolite not to reciprocate." Chief Stewardly took the debt note and returned to the Chiao family. He saw the Chiao family members leisurely sipping tea in the living room, chatting and laughing. They didn't care at all about Yin Yang, who was sitting on the side with a face as dark as the bottom of a pot. Everyone was chatting about Xiao Sen's homework and praising the young monk for doing well. Every day, when it was time, they would immediately wake Xiao Sen up to study. It was as if the time had been set. Seeing that Manager Li had returned, Arbor looked at him with a faint smile, nodded, and said, "Give it to me." Chief Stewardly turned around and glanced at Yin Yang. Yin Yang gritted her teeth and nodded heavily. Only then did Chief Stewardly step forward and respectfully hand the debt note to the young crown princess. "Chief Stewardly, I see that you're sweating profusely. You must have been in a hurry on the way back, right?" Kai Xiu, pour a cup of tea for Chief Stewardly. "Oh, right, don't forget about the lady boss as well." "Yes." Kai Xiu covered her mouth and snickered. She turned around and poured a cup of tea for Chief Stewardly before holding it in front of him. Chief Stewardly stiffened his neck and received the tea with trembling hands.